Okay, Mayor, we are now live.
Good evening. I hereby call the June 16th, 2020 East Lansing City Council meeting to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Babcock,
Present.
Councilmember Gregg,
Here.
Councilmember Meadows,
I'm here.
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens,
Here.
Mayor Byer.
The next item on the agenda is approval of tonight's agenda. I move approval of tonight's agenda. Seconded by Mr. Meadows. Any changes to the agenda? Comments? All right, all those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. The agenda is adopted. The next item, 1.3, approval of the minutes from June 9th, 2020. I move approval of the minutes. Can I get a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Stevens. Any changes? Discussion? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes from June 9th, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. Now we're going on to the second part of the agenda, which is communications. Any communications that were written to council have been posted on the website. If you wrote something that did not get posted, please let me know and I'll make sure that it does. 2.2, communications from the audience. So what we'll do here is Ms. Bartel will call everybody who's in the audience by phone number. And if you wish to speak, you'll be able to. If you don't want to speak and you just want to listen, you could just say pass. And we're asking everybody to keep their comments to 5 minutes. If your comments include questions for me or particular council people, then we will note your questions and answer them at the end of your time so that you don't lose your time. Okay, Ms. Bartel.
Thank you, Mayor. The first caller on the list is phone number 963. You may now address council.
Pass.
Thank you. And Mayor, that is the only caller on the list at this time.
Okay, so last time people tried to get in and they couldn't get in quickly enough. So if that happens and we find you there later, we can back up and let you speak when you can successfully get in. But for now, we will move on to number 2.3, communications from the mayor and council members. Which council member would like to go first? Raise your hand. Okay, Ms. Gregg.
Hey, I have a kind of belated thank you that I wanted to express. I had a lot on my mind last week and I didn't include this in my thoughts, but I just wanted to really express my appreciation to the whole team of city staff that worked to open the farmers market. That was something that was really important to me. And it was really meaningful for me to see something that was slightly changed, but still kind of business as usual in East Lansing. Obviously, we're going to have to make some changes, but I think that the whole group of people that was involved with opening that up did just a great job with reconfiguring the space, controlling the number of people that come into the market and still making it feel like a real, community coming together. So I just, I know that there was some stress involved with that for those people. And since I was the person that made a big deal about it, I wanted to express my gratitude. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Meadows.
Really not very much. I want to echo that comment and just say that I think that Councilmember Gregg's new hairdo is very attractive.
Okay, Councilmember Babcock.
Thank you. Along with thanking our city staff, I got a call last week. Caller ID showed East Lansing City Hall, and I must admit, my first thought was, oh no, what now? It was the library, and they have perfected a form of contactless delivery, and 2 books that I had requested earlier were in. I was euphoric. Our library is a special place for many reasons, and not least of which is the sign. Black Lives Matter, Black Stories Matter. The library has all of our old favorites, Little House on the Prairie and what have you, but it also has a really great collection of books that celebrate diversity for all age groups, particularly children. And I'd like to thank the library director and staff for all they do. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Stevens.
Sure. I have got a few things. So I will start out. First off, I wanted to thank everybody that's been reaching out to us regarding defunding the police and police reform in general. I've made an attempt to respond to most people via email, and I've attempted to call through people that left numbers to in an attempt to be as accessible as possible. If I haven't gotten to you yet, or if I haven't responded, it's just because of the pure volume of emails. I'm trying to make sure that I respond to each of them. So I wanted to give a really big shout out to the Pinecrest Neighborhood Association. Myself, Chuck Grigsby, Kristen Shelley, Sergeant Bovey, and I think another number of other folks and a lot of neighbors attended a Zoom neighborhood meeting, which was really cool, and it was really well done. And I wanted to give a really big kudos to Abby Taikaki on putting that together, because I thought it was really well done. There were a lot of good questions that were put forth. I thought a lot of really good neighborhood conversation happened, and I'm sure our city staff can appreciate, how difficult it is at times to run a Zoom meeting with 20, 30 people on the line. And so that was really cool. And I obviously thank our city staff for doing this for us. But definitely when it was just the one individual doing it, I wanted to give a shout out to that. I also wanted to highlight an event that is now going on in the Pinecrest neighborhood. It is Generations for Justice. It's a Juneteenth neighborhood demonstration and celebration. It'll be happening on Friday, June 19th at 4 p.m. At meeting places, the Pinecrest neighborhood sign at Crown Boulevard in Harrison. Attempt to bring masks and water. This is it was talked about at the Pinecrest Neighborhood Association meeting by a woman named Nicole Biber, who does a lot of good community work, and really wanted to show that their neighborhood has a rejection of systemic racism and a celebration of diversity in their neighborhood. So I just wanted to shout that event out. I asked at some point for a discussion on the development projects. I was glad to see that on the agenda. I just think, I've gotten a couple of questions here or there from folks in the community. I think it's a good thing to periodically, even if we don't have something on the agenda, this is just something that I think we should do at a council meeting. This is the time when we communicate with people, and, especially because we have been doing things via Zoom and a lot of things are kind of up in the air. I do think it's good to just kind of update people on where projects are and what's going on. And that goes for any number of issues in the city, but development especially. I want to again thank staff for setting up these meetings, and I want to plug something that I talked about in the beginning of these Zoom meetings that I think should be highlighted now that we might be moving into in-person meetings. I'm not saying it's going to happen now or even in the next month or so, but when we get to that point, I really would love to see a Zoom call-in option or just a phone call-in option at regular council meetings. It's fairly, to come to a meeting, be there and sit through, and actually be in person can be a hindrance to some folks that might want to actually participate in the local government process. And I do think that offering an option like that, if possible, would lead to probably a lot more people participating and, being part of the conversation. So I really would love to see that when we move into in-person meetings. And then I've got some thoughts on some of the items on the agenda, but I'll wait until we get to that point. So.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Gregg.
I just wanted to, I think the public might not be aware of the flurry of email that we have had regarding defund the police. So when Councilmember Stevens says that he has tried to call back every single one of those people, he told me that yesterday and my heart dropped because I felt like maybe I should also do the same thing. We're talking about in excess of about 150 emails at this point. So that really is, quite a monumental task that he's taken on. And I just wanted to say, props to you, Aaron. That is, amazing outreach, and I will follow your good example.
Thanks, Councilmember Gregg.
Okay, so my comments tonight, full disclosure, I was against having the farmers market this year because I didn't want COVID to spread in East Lansing. I wanted us to do everything we could to prevent it. And I walked by the farmers market and I noticed that everybody that I saw had a mask, which made me feel really good. The booths were spread out more. And I think it being outside, I've changed my mind. I'm glad we opened the farmers market. And I will contrast that to our other great idea, which was to close down Albert and put in some picnic tables so people could eat outside, so our restaurants could have some customers and start to reopen and hopefully keep from ever having to close forever. And that, while I've enjoyed it, has not turned out quite as well because I would say more than half of the people there are not social distancing and not wearing masks. Now, of course, you don't have to wear a mask while you eat, but there are groups of 8, 10, 12 people. And then when the bars get open and more people are going, there are people in line just, right next to each other with no masks. So that's a contrast. I don't know. I mean, there's not a whole lot we can do about it, but I do want people to remember. I do want people to remember if they don't wear a mask and they have the virus, which they could easily have and not know it, they could infect somebody else. And that person could infect somebody else. And we could go back to where we were in March and April and then have to close everything down again. So just, I don't know how to say it. I don't want to be insulting, but think about the consequences of what you're doing when you're not wearing a mask. And I know nobody thinks they have the virus, but it turns out people do have the virus. And there's just because things are open doesn't mean things are safe. You're just as likely to get the virus now as you were a month ago. So anyway, that's all I had. The next item, 2.4. Yeah, yes. Mr. Meadows.
Yeah, I want to just second what Aaron said about continuing the access by Zoom, at least for people who are calling in after we get back to face. And actually, I'm hoping the governor allows that council members can participate by Zoom too, because sometimes you can be out of the city and at least then you could be part of the meeting instead of just being absent. But I also want to mention that there was a news report today of 16 friends who went to a bar somewhere in Florida. All 16 then tested positive for the coronavirus, and all 16 talked about the fact that they had then interacted with a whole bunch of other people. So this is a significant danger. Luckily, we aren't seeing the numbers of new cases that Florida is, which is, opened up way too early. So I agree. I think that we need to monitor this in the downtown area, and I'm sure we'll talk about how we could do that, but certainly we need to encourage people to wear their mask when they do recreate in the downtown area.
Councilmember Stevens.
Sorry, and just one more thing. I wanted to give kudos to staff on some of the changes that I saw at City Hall when I was there the other day. Just like the kind of the screening process for getting in, making sure folks have masks, even if they don't, have one on them themselves. And, checking temperatures before coming in. I just, it might not be a perfect system and there might be issues in the future, but I was very impressed when I did walk in, just to, the level of care that was taken there. So I just wanted to give a plug for that.
Okay. City Manager's report, Mr. Lannis.
Great. Thank you, Your Honor. So thanks to Councilmember Stevens or Mayor Pro Tem Stevens for the comment. He noticed, obviously, we did reopen on Monday, and staff has put a lot of time, effort, and thought into opening safely. So there are extra barriers, there's markings on the floor, there's screening at the door. So I think overall, a very good plan for reopening. And we also have social distancing through the work share program and having some people telecommuting still. So city government is open. Hopefully people only attend the offices if they're in good health and check their temperature first. But we're available and open at this point forward and hope to keep everyone safe and serve the community. Thank you.
City Attorney's report. Mr. Yaden?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have a report this evening.
The next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which will be read by the city manager, Mr. Lannis.
Yes, we have the following items on the consent agenda for council's consideration. Item 3.1, approve a contract with Allied Mechanical Services Incorporated to perform major maintenance and improvements at the combined sewer overflow retention treatment basin in the amount of $674,000 and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 3.2, approve a contract with Bornor Restoration Incorporated to replace 5 roofs at the Water Resource Recovery Facility and 1 at the combined sewer overflow retention treatment basin in the amount of $435,000 and authorize the city manager to sign. Item 3.3, approve the purchase of an updated security system and cameras from Redford Lock Security Solutions for the East Lansing Public Library for $58,850.70, plus a contingency of $11,150. Item 3.4, set a public hearing for July 14, 2020 to consider Ordinance 1483, an application to rezone the property at 3400 West Road from OIP, Office Industrial Park District, to B5, Community Retail Sales Business District, and conditional M1, Manufacturing District, and 3401 Coolidge Road from OIP, Office Industrial Park District, to B5, Community Retail Sales Business District. Item 3.5, add-on, introduce and set for June 23rd, 2020 business agenda, Ordinance 1487, an ordinance to change the closing time of open-air dining areas to 9 p.m. Those are all the items on the consent agenda for council's consideration.
Does anybody have a question about anything on the consent agenda? Because I have one question. Mr. Lannis, can you please explain 3.5?
Yeah, so what we're looking at there is obviously we were taking our best guess when we set the time for 10 p.m. for the open air dining, particularly in Albert. And I think that our experience in watching it was that 10 o'clock gets a little bit close to the time that people are coming out to go to the bars, the lines at the various bars. And we thought that that interaction of lots of people coming and going to the bar lines and the drinking wasn't necessarily the environment we were looking for. So at this point, we're proposing to council to end the open air dining drinking permission, sort of the permission to have alcohol in that area at 9 p.m. Really what we would like also is to have another week to observe and to see how things go and be able to have a little bit more experience under our belts. So by next week, come back to council and say, yes, we'd in fact like you to change it to 9, or we think we can stay put at 10 p.m. But being there's not another meeting after this one, after the next one on the 24th, or is it 23rd? 23rd, sorry. We thought it best to introduce it at this point and then have a little bit more time to observe the situation. But I think overall it's going well, but it's just that little bit of time bumping up to the lines and the crowds that come out for the restaurant bars in the evening.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody like anything removed from the consent agenda? Okay. Therefore, I move approval of the consent agenda. Could I have a second? Seconded by
second.
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
I got you, Lisa. All right. Any opposed? Same sign. The consent agenda is adopted. All right, now we move on to the business agenda. Item 4.1, Downtown Development Authority projects discussion. I think almost every council member has asked to have this on. And Mr. Fehrenbach is going to be presenting tonight or discussing this tonight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Gordon's queuing up our presentation here. And I was asked to give a brief update of downtown development projects. I'd be happy to do that. And leave some time for questions at the end. So in terms of Center City, the project is essentially complete. There's a few minor kind of repair items, replanting of trees and that sort of thing. But the landmark is obviously been operational since last fall. Go ahead and next slide, please. The Newman Lofts similarly has been operational, including our parking deck. And obviously right now in front of it, we have the open air dining area. Go ahead, next slide. We do have a mural that's planned to be installed here. I think the plan is like the week of the 6th of July is when this will get underway. This is the artist, and if you want to go to the next slide, please, show the wall that it will be on. This is the eastern facing wall in the alley between Pinball Pete's and the project. Go ahead, next slide. So in terms of the hub, obviously also recently completed and has been operational since last fall. Go ahead, next slide. In terms of Park District, obviously with the COVID situation, there was a bit of a shutdown and some delay in the project, but it is back on track. This is the conceptual drawings provided as part of the developer's submittal. Go ahead, next slide. This is the area we're all familiar with at the corner of Abbot and Grand River. Go ahead. That's fine, Ms. Gordon, go ahead. So this is a picture from today. You can see it's coming along nicely. We've moved into sort of the curb and gutter, bike lane parts of the project on the ground floor. They continue to make progress upstairs. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. The infrastructure. The drywalls up to 13, the inspections are making their way up. The final mechanical, electrical, and plumbing inspections are to the 4th floor. Although there was a delay, they were also ahead of schedule at that time. So at this point, we're targeting the last week of July for final life safety with a completion target of early August, and move-in is planned late August. So there is a few week buffer there for taking care of the last punch list items. The developer and the construction team is certainly confident they're going to reach these targets. All indications seem to be that they're on target for this. So obviously we're watching this closely and having regular meetings with these folks and also coordinating the move-in dates that are planned for late August. Go ahead, next slide. So in terms of the graduates, they are a little bit behind. They've always been a little bit behind the Abbot in terms of the plan of attack. At this point, go ahead. This is from today, the picture. The work is gearing up. It's not quite as geared up as the Abbot is, and that's, I think, partly due to the site itself and the fact that the Abbot has a very strong timeline to reach, and so with the tight site, I think that the Abbot is kind of taking the main thrust of the work there. In terms of the progress, they have poured the final deck. So that's the floor for the final floor. There will be a top out soon in the next month or so. They are targeting at this point a spring 2021 opening. Go ahead, next slide. Building C has been approved, as you know. They have indicated they are retooling the design and architects, and I'm sorry, the building team to submit the building, to do the work to prep for building plan submittal. They're expecting that team will fire up here in early July, and they are targeting sort of a late fall submittal date. And I think their hope at this point is to break ground by the end of the year on this project. Go ahead, next slide. So in terms of some developing plans, obviously the MSUFCU project, we're very anxiously awaiting their formal submittal, which got pushed back a little bit. I think at this point, we're still expecting it to come sort of end of June. They have been working very diligently and have had many meetings with city staff and others in preparation for their actual submittal. You can go ahead and hit the next slide. And we have rezoned the lot to B3, as you know. We do expect, as I said, the formal submittal soon, probably the end of June at this point. And we currently have a purchase and sale agreement that targets a close date of September 23rd, 2020. That may need to get pushed out a bit, just depending on our process and timelines. Go ahead, next slide. So in terms of the Evergreen properties, go ahead. Currently, we are fairly close to design for the utilities that we've discussed several times with council. I think that essentially, it's been somewhat complicated by the DDA's Evergreen properties process. And so the kind of compromise that we made to continue to move forward with the design was to actually have a little bit of flexibility in terms of the design for the roadway and the water system. I think that the sewer is pretty much designed, needs to be designed sort of where it is. There's not a lot of flexibility there. I talked to Mr. House, our Public Works Director. He's indicated that he expects probably within the next couple of weeks that we would have a final design ready for council's review to send it out to bid. So go ahead, next slide. Just to reorient everyone, this is where the Evergreen properties are. I think we're all very aware of it at this point, but just to kind of orient it with the other. And here's kind of just a map that shows kind of the ownership. Obviously, the future right-of-way has now been created as Albert has been aligned across Abbot by the Park District project. That sidewalk on the north side is in, as well as the curb and gutter. The Evergreen properties here are in green. Red is privately owned, and yellow is the city parking lots that are owned by the city. Go ahead, next slide. We do have a respondent to the RFP process. As you know, the CITADEL project would be located here if it moves forward. We had a kickoff meeting today of the project team, which includes a number of stakeholders from the community, city staff, and council and planning commission. And that went fairly well. Go ahead, next slide. They're planning, basically their plans include mostly office with some commercial and parking. Currently, we have an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with the Downtown Development Authority, which includes creating this project team that we kicked off today. The developer is really seeking feedback. They've had a lot of meetings with all kinds of stakeholders from throughout the community, and they continue to do that. And I think they're planning to incorporate the feedback that they're receiving into their plans. They're very adamant that they are planning an office project, mainly office, with some commercial and parking as well. So next slide. Not downtown, but kind of other notable developments happening and kind of gearing back up post-COVID. Bertram Hills Retirement Community expansion. They're nearing completion with the foundation work in terms of the schools. Pinecrest and White Hills are about 85% complete. Marble just demoed some properties, some houses that were purchased by the school district, and I think they're just awaiting final word from the utility companies so that they can move forward with the demolition of Marble itself. In terms of medical marijuana, we've had our first certificate of occupancy issued for the Pleasant Trees at 1950 Merritt, the former dental office there on Merritt Road. They're expecting to open in the next week or so. And 3315 Coolidge Road is nearing completion. That's the Skymint location. We have opened a Brightwell Behavior. It's a geriatric psychiatric facility at 3512 Coolidge. And we have two insurance companies that have come to new buildings on Earl Avenue as well. So that is my brief update. I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Councilmember Stevens.
Thank you. And thank you, Tom, for doing that. I think there was a lot of really good information in there. I just had a couple of questions. So talk to me about move-in in regards to the Abbot. And I know that at the DDA you had mentioned that they're going to be submitting move-in plans due to wanting to space out move-ins. So talk to me about that, and then I have a follow-up hopefully after that.
Sure. So we are working to try to coordinate all the move-ins of the large projects downtown. So we have requested from each of the hub, the Center City, and the Abbot their plans, and we're hoping to bring those folks together, make sure they're coordinating with each other, and make sure they have a plan to stagger the move-in to avoid as much as possible the congestion, and sort of take into account the things that we learned from last year as well.
Sure. So as a follow-up, we don't know necessarily what's going to happen in the next few months, especially with MSU making a lot of decisions. And obviously, we know that students are going to be back, but I think that we're all cognizant of the fact that we're opening up slowly, but things could change very quickly in this situation. So did any of those developers or establishments kind of submit a plan for what they would do if there was a potential delay? And I'm cognizant of the Abbot, especially because while that timeline's not ridiculously close together, having final approval and everything by the beginning of August and then moving in at the end, there is the potential for that delay. So I want to make sure that that's kind of part of the conversation. Has that been part of the conversation so far, or?
It has, and in fact, we've requested that they provide us with information about how they will communicate and how they will effectuate a delay as basically an option. They've indicated that they will provide such a plan, but they're confident that they'll reach the early August timeframe and therefore take some of the anxiety away from this equation.
Okay, so just as a note, if there are any indications of delay, and I know that this is an obvious statement, but really being proactive on a plan for those students, I would, not even as a from a building standpoint, but just from a community standpoint, just wanting to know what they're planning on doing with students if they even need, a day later on move-in than what it is.
So they've indicated that they have good relationships with other other projects in the area that might have some vacancy.
Okay.
So that sounds like that would likely be their strategy. But again, we've asked for those plans and we will be certainly reviewing them.
Okay. If the mayor would allow, I have some questions on some of the other projects as well. Thank you. Can just a side note, can you make sure that council is aware when building plans are submitted for building C or build plans are submitted there? Just an email would be fine.
Sure.
And then just as a note, I didn't know there was a stakeholder meeting today with CITADEL folks. Who is involved in the stakeholder meeting?
So as part of the memorandum of understanding and really at the developer's request, a group was created that is known as the Evergreen Properties Project Team, and it is Open Meetings Act compliant meeting, duly noticed, and is made up of folks from various stakeholder groups, neighboring properties such as the People's Church, MSU, Planning Commission members, DDA members, some council, at least the mayor. And others that I'm sure I'm blanking on, but essentially the idea is to get as much feedback as possible for the developer to incorporate into the design, and to make sure that any issues are ferreted out here early on in the process.
All right, and one kind of final question on CITADEL. So there was a conversation at DDA, or maybe just between myself and another DDA member, concerned to parking. I know that they had originally intended on on having on-site parking, and I don't know if that's still the case. Is that correct?
They indicated today that they have a preference for finding another spot in the area for a standalone parking structure, or potentially a parking structure that includes some other uses, and that they may still desire some on-site parking, but certainly from a cost perspective, I think that's driving them to look at other properties in the area.
Okay. Can you just update council on where that is? I know that was kind of a big thing for DDA members. I think it was a big thing for council members as well, and for the community. So I'm interested to see kind of what locations they'd be looking at that would be reasonable for office. Do you have any indication of where they'd be looking at, or did they just say they were looking at outside places?
So certainly any adjacent properties, potentially lot 8 as well, potentially, private properties. They've indicated that it's kind of a no stone unturned situation. So they're clearly having conversations with a lot of folks in that area.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate the update.
Councilmember Stevens, this is what we should do, which I wish I had thought about it today, but I will make sure that we send a notice to every council member when the next meeting is, so you can get on just as an observer.
Oh yeah. Honestly, it might be my bad that I just didn't see it. It was just an interesting.
I don't know that it was, it wasn't clear that what exactly what it was. So that will really help. And then we can all be on the same page. I will say today, I was planning to report out, Mr. Fehrenbach did most of it, but I will say that People's Church was very positive about this. They're glad that, in their words, that people are finally taking seriously the fact that there's not enough parking west of Abbot. So they seem to have a good relationship with the McGraws. So that was positive.
Yeah.
It was a very pretty, very flashy, presentation, and if they can do it, it's going to just be game changing for the city.
Yeah, and I'm optimistic about that fact. I just know that parking was just such a big, component of that, and so the reason why I ask is just really because when I did hear that from a DDA member, I was a little bit concerned myself, because I know that was kind of a big contingency of the project. So I appreciate the update. Yeah.
So will you, Mr. Fehrenbach, make sure that the next time that meeting is scheduled, that everybody just gets a notice that it's scheduled? I'll be attending, but everybody else can attend. I think Mr. Meadows attended today just as an observer. So Councilmember Meadows.
I just want to ask Tom, just to make sure that, it just happened that I heard about it and I decided that I would, observe the meeting. But if more than 2 of us are on that, should we notice this next meeting saying that it's possible that a majority of council members will be observing or in the meeting, Tom?
If you're just observing, there's not an OMA problem. Council can attend and observe a meeting. A quorum of council can do that. If council intends to participate at all, if more than 2 members anticipate participating in the meeting at all, then it should be noticed as that a quorum of council will be there as well.
I'll pledge that I won't be asking any questions or participating in the meeting, but I do intend on.
Mark, you just got really quiet.
I got really quiet?
Oh, that's better.
Okay.
We hear
Get
you.
closer.
Yeah, really.
I'll just pledge that I'm not gonna say anything in these meetings. I just want to know what's going on. But I will note that I thought that they indicated that based on their plans that they have right now, they have about 260 or 250 parking spaces within their building. That assumes if they are also building on the property that's next to our parking lot down there. And clearly, I would say from my standpoint that we need to be looking at an approval of this project, if we do approve it, that includes substantially new parking in the west end of the downtown. So I think we need at least 700 spaces down there. And we have a hotel, we have an apartment complex, we have all these offices. We need more parking down there. I know Ruth is having a heart attack right now, but I think that we need more parking.
So just a correction, Mark. This is the difference between attending and listening. You probably went out to get a snack. So CITADEL has said that they can't put parking. It's too expensive to put parking in their building. Their original plan did have 200 and some spaces, but that increases their rent for everything else because parking doesn't pay. So they are looking at working with everybody around there to find a place to put a lot of parking, maybe two places rather than one huge ramp, maybe two smaller ramps. But yes, they're concerned about parking. Okay,
Sorry.
Councilmember Greg, I'll come back to you, Mr.
Yeah,
Stevens.
all good.
Well, just connecting the dots between what Mark just said and what Ruth just said. Mark, are you talking about a municipal parking structure west of Abbot, or are you talking about if they build some sort of freestanding structure on an adjoining lot that would be sufficient?
They built a freestanding structure on an adjoining lot that only serviced their building. They have the authority to do that.
Right.
But we need substantial parking in that end of town. I'm thinking that it has to be a municipal parking structure because we have no parking for the hotel.
Right.
We would be presumably we'd be using I know everybody gasped, but taking another surface lot and building a parking structure on it. But we desperately need parking in that area because it's going to continue to redevelop. And I don't think this is the last project we're going to see down there. So.
Can I just follow the parking? I guess this is East Lansing. So building C, is there parking in that project? I totally can't remember.
Yes, there is.
Yeah,
There is.
but it's all right. Sorry.
It's less than the residents though.
Less than the number of residents.
Okay.
Fehrenbach, do you remember how many spots are in building C?
He's probably looking it up right now.
I want to say that it's 89, but give me a minute here.
And then however that contrasts to the occupancy of that building.
And if I remember correctly, those were spots that the residents would have to purchase as well. That they would
Yeah.
be paying for.
So no, I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's 32 spaces for residential use for 99 units.
Right, it was roughly 1/3 of the units, let alone the actual population and for purchase.
Right. Okay.
Just a comment about parking. The previous council was not that interested in parking. So this is a new, except for Mr. Meadows, which we had to slap down on a regular basis. But there is no parking over there. So I think I even agree that we need some parking. 700 spaces might be a little much for me, just because I don't want a massive ramp down there. We already have Ramp Avenue of Albert. I don't want another Ramp Avenue over on that side.
It is Albert, so we could just continue that theme onto the west side.
That's true.
No.
There was another very pertinent and intelligent question in my brain and it just fled, but it might come back to me.
Any other questions? Mr. Stevens?
Thank you. I promise you'll hear less of my voice over time, but so I think that we should at some point, if it comes down to it, have the conversation. And we had this conversation before, actually at that joint meeting between the DDA and the city council way back when about that rule on municipal owned lots. I'm not saying I'm sitting here in favor of having private owned lots that can be used for other structures, but I am saying that if they're having the conversation of, having an offsite parking place, and we're having the conversation of many adjacent developments and buildings that don't have or might not have the necessary parking. And of course, that's a separate issue with the parking task force and a lot of work that's being done over there. We might want to have that conversation in the future of if that rule might not be the correct one. Again, I'm not saying I'm in favor of it, but
The McGraws are they want to work with us. They don't want to do one thing or the other. They want to do what works best for the city. At least that's what they say. And I think that they're being genuine when they say that. So they want to do the parking that we want to do. Isn't that the feeling you got, Mr. Meadows?
Yes, and in fact, I think the conversation hasn't just been with the with that project, it's been with the church as well. So, we're looking for a partnership between the city, the developer, and the church to provide appropriate parking in that west end.
No, I understand that. Mayor, you made a really good point. My point was not necessarily that, they might need it. It's that the best option for the city might actually not be a municipal owned lot. I mean, we talk about parking a heck of a lot, and we talk about budgeting a heck of a lot with it. And, to build something like that and then own it, that might involve some, financing that we're not willing to go for. So I just, as a side note, during the conversation, I want to keep that as an open option yeah.
Thank you. Councilmember Gregg.
I remembered my pertinent question. I was wondering about the occupancy of the new Albert Avenue ramp. I understand that the apartment part of that is fairly unoccupied at the moment. So that level of the ramp I would understand would be unoccupied, but the public level of the ramp, are people using that yet?
So it does sound like it's getting some use. It certainly got a significant amount of use from the parking staff perspective while it was open, while the gates were open. I know that things have started to ramp up. They're certainly nowhere near our kind of normal. Oh, sorry for the unintended pun. But it certainly looks like they're getting more usage, and the data continues to come in on kind of a weekly basis, and is looking like more folks are coming.
I think
something too, that ramp has a substantial pre-lease that is built into the ground lease that we provided to them. So there's about 250, Tom, 250 public spaces in there. The rest we receive revenue for, whether there's somebody in those apartments or not.
Right. I was more interested in the public part of it, because it seemed like people hadn't really found it yet, even though it was open. I think, speaking to Councilmember Stevens' point, I think and now obviously I was not on council when these conversations happened, but my impression was that the reason that we felt that the parking should be municipally controlled was that there might be revenue attached to that at some point that we could use for our general fund. And I think in practice that has not been the case. The maintenance on those ramps has really consumed pretty much entirely the income from those ramps. So at this point, parking is paying for parking. And I do appreciate Aaron's point that we might not want to be in the parking business as deeply as we are. And so extending that to the west side might not be in our interest.
And I would ask that Mr. Lahanas talk to finance about this very issue.
Yeah, I think we should look at the numbers of it where we decide.
And I don't want to make any decisions. Just ask Ms. Felposh, given that we might have brownfield to pay for it, we might have to bond to pay for it. However, and she probably doesn't have enough data right now, but I know parking is in danger because of COVID, and it wasn't looking very good before. So I think everybody agrees that it's an issue. I don't know if we can agree on what the solution is right now.
No, but I think we should talk about it. And I think we should kind of talk about it with an idea of like really kind of analyzing our interest in it in terms of.
I think the time for that is when we actually get a project being.
Right. We don't know what, we don't know what it is. Okay, can we move on to Parks and Recreation? Everybody ready for that?
I got one more question. It wasn't on Tom's list, but
get closer, Mark.
When is the Coleman Road opening? The Coleman Road extension?
Scott House might have to answer that. Scott, are you on the call?
I think it must be fairly soon.
Yes, it looks like it's coming along, but is Scott is on the call.
House?
Scott, can you hear me?
He's unmuted, but he can't make his noises.
All right, we'll have him jump in at some point. We'll get an answer for you.
I also wanted to say before we leave, this is an amazing amount of development for a very small development team. So you're doing a great job, Mr. Fehrenbach. If it ever gets to be too much, that's too bad. Keep up the good work.
That's your
All right,
mayor.
next. Next, Parks and Recreation, Mr. McCaffrey.
Well, good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. We have a PowerPoint presentation for you this evening with respect to the Parks and Recreation projects update. Mr. Lahannis asked me last week to go ahead and do a project update. So we're breaking it down into current projects that are underway, followed by projects that are in design, and then projects that are tend to be on the horizon here. So Ms. Gordon, if you could go to the next slide. The first project is the Patriarch Park Baseball Field Improvements Project, which has been sort of on the horizon for several years, and we are moving into completion of that. If you could go to the next slide. It is the four fields that exist in that sort of square were all renovated as part of this particular project. And we had tremendous support from the East Lansing Baseball Club. If you go to the next slide. Here is a photo that I believe was taken today of the project. As you can see, we have replaced all of the fencing. We've replaced all of the backstops. We've replaced the benches. We've installed bicycle loops, and there's trash containers as well as recyclable containers in the project. You see spectator seating, that's spectator seating that existed, and we have spectator seating on 2 fields, but not on all 4 fields at this point in time. Next slide, please. The project was funded through a $50,000 Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund grant, and we also used $235,500 of income tax funds for a total project of $285,500. And the income tax funds were, of course, the portion that's dedicated for Parks and Recreation. Next slide, please. So another project that we have underway at this point in time is our White Park Nature Area Improvements and Trail Extension. The project has paved trail improvements associated with it. It has a boardwalk component in it, which is about an 800-foot section of boardwalk that's part of it. It has excavation of the pond in the south portion of the project to improve fisheries. It has improvements to the invasive species and work around invasive species. It has in the corner at Lake Lansing Road, where you have the turn there, the project eventually will have signalization that will take pedestrians across Lake Lansing Road and onto the west side of Tower Avenue. And our portion of the project, once you get off of the White Park project, also includes the photo on the left-hand side, the paved trail from the south end of the softball complex will connect to the Northern Tier Trail at the north end of the softball complex. The Tower Avenue section that is in Meridian Township is not being completed at this point in time. However, the Meridian Township has applied for funds through the Ingham County Trails and Parks Millage, and they are in the process of acquiring the easement on the property to go ahead and make that connection, which will create another nice loop in our trail system. Next slide, please. This is photos of trail sections that were paved the end of last week, and the picture on the right is the trail along the east side of the White Park wooded area, and the picture on the left is the trail along Tower Avenue from the south end of the softball complex to the north end of the softball complex. Next slide, please. This is a project that we received a $300,000 Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund grant for, and the Ingham County Trails and Parks millage funded $469,000 of this project. So it's a total project of $769,500 using those two outside fund sources. Next slide, please. Another project we have that's underway at this time is improvements to Bailey Park in the Bailey neighborhood. This project includes resurfacing of the existing playground in the park. It includes the installation of a toddler playground as part of the project. It includes a small plaza area with seating and a pergola and some landscaping. It includes a loop trail around the perimeter of the park, and it includes little landscape pods throughout the park, creating a little bit of a barrier between the park setting and the trail setting, and of course the road. Next slide, please. Here is photos that were taken at the end of last week, or possibly even yesterday, of the park. And this is the condition of the park, obviously, right now. The photo on the lower left-hand corner is the existing playground that will receive new surface. And the other two are areas that are, of course, trail areas where the existing sidewalks were removed, and the pathway will take the place of those old sidewalks that were removed. Next slide, please. This is a number of funding sources were assembled in order to make this project work. The Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund grant we received was $219,000. We are also using $69,400 of community development block grant funds. The Capital Area Housing Partnership is providing $25,000 for this project. And the Bailey Community Association started a fundraising effort, and we have already collected $14,000. And I think that there's really more than $14,000 that the Bailey Community Association has collected. And we're using $3,000 from city general fund revenues to fund this project. Next slide, please. The Orchard Street Pump House Roof and Soffit Replacement Project. Contract was awarded. I can't remember exactly which meeting, about 1 or 2 meetings ago, that City Council awarded a contract at the staff request and recommendation. So the roof will be replaced at the Orchard Street Pump House, as well as you can see the conditions of the condition of the existing soffit that will be replaced at the Orchard Street Pump House. The graphic shows $28,724 of general fund, but actually the Orchard Street Pump House board is putting, I think, $4,000 towards the $28,000. So the general fund expense will be more like $24,000. I don't remember the exact amount, but it's around $4,000 that the Orchard Street Pump House board will put towards the project. Next slide, please. So the East Lansing Hannah Community Center Theater Sound and Lighting. This is the phase 2 project, which is underway at this point in time, which includes what's called a cyclorama. You see that, the lower right-hand photo and slide. What that does is it provides an opportunity. It's almost like a screen that you can put screenshots up on. You can use it for color. You can use it for different purposes. You could put a scene for a play up there or something of that nature. It also includes stage skirting, house lights, and a ClearCom system, which is a sound system associated with the project. Again, income tax funds from the Parks and Recreation portion of the income tax fund, and a Council of the Art and Cultural Affairs grant of $20,000 was awarded for that particular project also. Next slide, please. Okay, now projects in design and the engineering phase. So these are projects that were in design on at this particular time. Next slide. The Patriarch's Park Pavilion and Restroom Renovation Project is the project. Next slide, please. That's an overall picture of the spot. First of all, with the north restroom, which is the restroom immediately adjacent to the Park Pavilion, there's the existing floor plan on the right and the proposed floor plan on the left. For that particular project, The interior of the restroom will be completely renovated. I'm sure if you've been in that restroom, you know that it is beyond the time to do the renovation for that particular restroom. And then next slide, please. In addition to the interior improvements, the exterior will be improved quite a bit also. We will have new roofs put on the north restroom, and we will have all the soffits replaced. You saw the picture of the soffits at the Orchard Street Pump House, existing soffits at that particular, both of the restrooms at Patriarch Park are similar in terms of their condition. And then there'll be sidewalks and what have you around the project, around the perimeter of the restrooms. Next slide, please. The south restroom interior improvements this is the restroom that is immediately adjacent to the southeast ball field and across from the tennis court and pickleball courts. And the photo on the right shows the existing floor plan, and with the traditional setting for a men's restroom and a women's restroom. And we are going to a 4 individual stall restroom at this particular location, which could be considered a gender neutral restroom situation and or family change area restroom situation at Patriarch Park. Next slide, please. And then in addition to the complete interior improvement, we are also doing the, again, the ceiling, or excuse me, roof replacement, soffit replacement, the green and white thing out in front of the building. We are working, Wendy Longpre spoke with the Art Commission about perhaps doing doing some sort of art mural or something of that to replace that, leave that there, but make it more attractive than what it is at this point in time at the south restroom as far as the exterior improvements are concerned. So that's to come later at some point, but hopefully we'll be able to do that. Next slide, please. And then of course the pavilion, a complete renovation of the pavilion, including replacement of the roof, replacement of the soffits, a look at all of the existing improvements in the interior, a little bit of changes with respect to those projects on the interior, and moving some things around to help with traffic flow and what have you on the inside of the pavilion at Patriarch Park when that gets completely renovated. Next slide, please. So in addition to the improvements to the restrooms and the pavilions, we're looking at landscaping and access improvements. We will be looking at connecting through paved hard surface from the parking lot immediately adjacent to the ball field. That will connect you directly to the pavilion itself. It will provide connection to the playground and connection to the playground or to the parking lot immediately west of that particular section. Also, we are looking at expanding the ability to have larger gatherings by adding hard pavement surface on both the north and the south side of the pavilion, so that we could perhaps expand our event opportunities at that particular location with larger hard surface areas, as well as perhaps some additional seating in those particular areas. The south restroom at the other corner of the park has access improvements associated with it also when we get to that. So go ahead. This project is funded through a Natural Resources Trust Fund grant, and that is a $300,000 grant. And in the fiscal year 21 budget, we have requested and in the budget at this time, $200,000 use of income tax funds for this particular project to have about a $500,000 project associated with the complete restroom and renovation. Next project, please. The Pedestrian connections to the Northern Tier Trail is a project we've been talking about for a number of years. And what we have here is connecting the Northern Tier Trail to the Tamarisk neighborhood at Riveria Drive through a pedestrian bridge, and connecting the Bessemer neighborhood to the Northern Tier Trail at Colorado Drive. Next slide, please. This is a photo, a depiction, if you will, of the connection. I apologize, it says connection at Colorado Drive. This is actually the connection at Riveria Drive, okay, is what the photo shows on the right, and how that could possibly look. I assure you that those will be, when we do this project, those will be real landscaping and real bushes and what have you versus depictions of that. And then the next slide, please. This says connection at Riveria Drive. This is actually the connection at Colorado Drive, looking at Colorado Drive to the Northern Tier Trail. And that's kind of how that particular project will look. Next slide, please. As I think some city council may remember, is we had a $469,000 funded from the Ingham County Trails and Parks Millage, and we were trying to get $300,000 Natural Resources Trust Fund grant as match. We did not get that match from the Natural Resources Trust Fund. However, we went back and visited with the Ingham County Parks Commission, and then through a series of meetings attended by Wendy Longpre of our staff, the Ingham County Trails Parks Commission recommended to the Ingham County Board of Commissioners that they fully fund the entire project, and the Board of Commissioners at their meeting on Tuesday evening this past week agreed to fully fund the entire project. So we will be moving forward with that project in the very near future as far as starting the design and engineering process. Next slide, please. Relocation of a section of the Northern Tier Trail along the Sanderson Drain. This is south of the bridge. It's immediately south of the soccer complex. That trail is, as it turned out, very close to the Sanderson Drain, and at portions of it, there's a significant slope that causes a bit of a safety issue. So we talked with the Ingham County Parks Commission about that. Next slide, please. And the County Parks Commission recommended, and the County Board of Commissioners agreed to fully fund the relocation of a section of, it's about a 600 or 800 foot section of trail that will be moved a little bit to the east and further away from the drain for safety purposes. Next slide, please. This is a project that we submitted a Natural Resources Trust Fund grant for in April. We are doing a public hearing tomorrow night because we did not do a public hearing when the grant was submitted. We received permission from the Natural Resources Department of Natural Resources to do a public hearing and request the resolutions from City Council at a later date. So this is the Patriarch Park Athletic Courts Reconstruction Project. This is the existing condition at that park in terms of what it looks like from an aerial view. Next slide, please. What we are doing is we're proposing a significant renovation to the tennis courts and the addition of additional pickleball courts and reconstruction of the entry drive into Patriarch Park, improvement to the existing parking lot, putting a little small plaza with a covered area in it, bicycle loops in the project, going from the existing 6 pickleball courts to 10 pickleball courts, and adding, reconstructing one of the tennis courts, putting an entryway through the project, and reconstructing the basketball courts. This essentially is 2 projects, 2 grant requests. This, of course, neither one of these projects have, of course, been approved as yet by the Natural Resources Trust Fund. It was an April submittal. And after we go to the Parks Commission tomorrow night and have a public hearing. In July, we'll be coming to the City Council requesting that you approve a resolution in support of the grant being submitted to the Department of Natural Resources for one Natural Resources Trust Fund grant and one Recreation Passport grant. Next slide, please. The dollar amounts associated with this project would be a $300,000 Natural Resources Trust Fund grant, and we would be proposing the use of income tax funds as we look out to 2022 or 2023 fiscal years. So it's not in the upcoming fiscal year. It would be 2 years out, possibly 3 years out fiscal years. Basketball court improvements through the Michigan Recreation Passport Grant Program, $125,000 $800 grant request. And same thing there, looking out to 2022 fiscal year or 2023 fiscal year for the basketball court improvements. Next slide, please. East Lansing Hannah Community Center parking lot resurfacing and ADA ramp improvement. The Department of Public Works engineering staff is working closely on this, and this project was of course approved in the fiscal year 21 budget, which includes over close to the entry in this circular area on the depiction, the addition of ADA accessibility ramp and a complete resurfacing of the entry drive as well as the parking lot resurfacing for hopefully not just the main lot, but also the northwest lot as well as the lots in the Forest Street side of the project, but it's all going to depend on funds and what have you. Next slide, please. There again, $150,000 from the general fund, $36,000 from the garage fund, $10,000 community development block grant, and the prime time was going to put $50,000 towards this. I'm not sure if this is from their fund balance or if it's from the Friends of the Prime Time. I really don't remember for sure. Next slide, please. The Aquatic Center liner replacement is a project that is on hold right now. However, it's our plan to go ahead and continue on with the engineering and design associated with the project. So in the event we decide we're going to move forward with the project, we would go ahead and be able to do the Aquatic Center liner in time to open next year, if that is the decision that we decide to move forward with. You can see that the liner in the corner of the large picture on the left-hand side is pulling away from the wall. This liner is 15 years of service that we got from the liner. The anticipated life of a liner is 10 years, and we got 15 years of service. And frankly, I think this year with the pool empty, it's going to be tougher on this liner than with the pool filled. You can see where the liner is pulling away from the bottom at another section. And you can see in this particular photo right here where the liner has been patched multiple times. Next slide, please. That is a $150,000 project with the suggestion or recommendation for the funds to come from the income tax fund if we move forward with the project. Next slide, please. Softball complex improvements. This is where the East Lansing Baseball Club has worked closely with us, and we'd like to do some work to all of the benches at the softball complex with these funds, which will completely use the funds up. And that would include putting covers over the benches, putting some pavement underneath the benches, and providing a pretty significant improvement to the benches. But we're working closely with the baseball club at this time because they might want to look at a little bit different scope than that. And they're the group that raised the funds for the project. So we'll be working with them on determining our final scope for that particular project as we look towards the future. Next slide, please, which I think we're done. So that's the end of the slideshow.
Thank you, Mr. McCaffrey. Does anybody have any questions? Councilmember Gregg.
Not a question, just a comment. I just wanted to say that I'm really excited about the pedestrian bridges. I thought that when we didn't get our DNR match for that it was off the table for at least 2 years. So I am really excited about that. I want to express my thanks to the Ingham County Board of Commissioners for approving that funding from the millage and for all of the work that you guys put in, obviously, to make that happen, because I thought that was a ways out down the road, and I'm really thrilled to connect those two neighborhoods to our trail system.
Thank you.
Councilmember Meadows?
Compliment Tim. You know, there was a point in time where we weren't getting any natural resources trust fund money into the city. And actually the head of the NRTF was Gordon Geyer, who was a former president of Michigan State University and was head of the Department of Natural Resources and ended up on that. And he had communicated to the city at some point, why isn't East Lansing ever asking for any money from us? When Tim was hired, we started to see a steady stream of NRTF money into the city of East Lansing. I really want to compliment you, Tim. You've kept it going all these years. This is a great lineup of projects. So my hat's off to you.
Mark, thank you so much. I'd like to express gratitude to Wendy Longpre and all the work that she does to assist with that. And certainly assistance from first Ted State and then now George Lahannis, and of course, supportive city council over the years on all of these projects. So thank you.
Mr. McCaffrey, speaking of the support of city council, so pickleball is exploding. I get calls, emails, when does Patriarch go to open? When is Patriarch going to open? So now it's open. And as you know, those courts are just terrible. They're great to have, but they've got cracks all over them. Now we have brand new courts at Michigan State, brand new courts in Meridian Township, 2 sets of them. And Patriarch is just the best place to play. Everybody prefers to play at Patriarch, even though the courts are, sort of patched together, just because East Lansing is such a cool place and everybody shows up there and it's just a blast. So I'd like to get that in as soon as possible, not 2023, because that seems crazy long, but I know it's all about the money and whether we get the grant and whether or not COVID is going to, all that, but just putting a plug in there. Councilmember Babcock.
Just Patriarch, family name, Patriarch.
Oh, Patriarch. Right,
Sorry,
Patriarch.
had to do it.
No, thank you. I need to know that. I am the mayor. Councilmember Greg.
I don't know how easy it is to go back to the slide. Can we go back to the Hannah Center parking lot for a second? I just had a question about the all the different agencies that were involved with that.
One of the last ones, I think.
It was kind of, I think it was kind of in the middle. Sorry. I was looking for it on my agenda too.
We're looking at general fund money. We're looking at some Department of Public Works money. We're looking at, I think, some community development block grant money. And I think we're also looking at, obviously, some money from the prime time. So I think those were the 4 fund sources.
So I think it was the community. I mean, we've been talking a lot about the community development block grants and what they can get used for. And I was wondering what the criteria was for that in that project.
That particular project, I believe that the accessibility ramps were a contributing factor for that.
Okay.
For the availability of the community development block grant funds.
Councilmember Babcock.
Thank you. Just a reminder that came to me from the primetime program. They were very concerned about where the curb cuts were and that it was inaccessible, presented falling risks for some of the primetime users. So that's sort of where we got that started. Thanks.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Go ahead and shout out if I can't see you. All right, we'll move on then. Thank you very much, Mr. McCaffrey. That was a great presentation.
Thank you.
All right, next is disorderly conduct ordinance discussion. And Councilmember Stevens and I both wanted to put this on here. And I thought what we would do is just go through it. Can we get that on the screen by any chance, Mr. Lahannis? Oh, yes, perfect. And can you make it a little bit bigger? Get rid of there, perfect, perfect. Can everybody see that? Shake your head.
Yeah.
All right, so I thought what we do is just go through these and talk about them. Councilmember Stevens has some things already prepared, and we'll just get to them when we get to them. Is that okay, Councilmember Stevens?
Yeah, that's fine. Just because we might not be able to see each other, I might just shout out if there's
Yeah.
one of the ones that I want to talk
Yep.
about.
Perfect. So the first, and the idea here is, are there things that we might not want to prohibit or we might not want to police? Because the fewer times police have to police, the less likely bad things will happen or anything will happen. So that's the idea here. So the first one is about intoxication, being intoxicated in a public place and be endangering directly the safety of another person or property. So this is one that happens a lot in East Lansing. A lot of times it happens without any blood alcohol tests being done. So, I mean, I've actually been on the other end of this before, a long time ago.
You tell.
No, that's okay. It was a bad day. It was never mind. Anyway, so does anybody have anything about number one?
And just as a side note, can we get maybe Tom can answer this, but just kind of a definition of what you're talking about when it says endangering directly the safety of another person. And obviously I want to highlight the fact that it says directly on there, but I wanted to.
Yeah, the state statute, the public health code prohibits us from making it illegal simply to be intoxicated in a public place. They've decriminalized that. So this follows the state statute with regard to when intoxication in a public place is illegal, and it's only when you're endangering the safety of another person or property. Directly means it's not in some indirect fashion, I guess, in the sense that, because you're staggering down the sidewalk, you might scare a car or a driver or something of that nature. So it has to be a direct endangerment.
Okay.
All right, the next one, number two, knowingly engage in any indecent or obscene conduct in a public place or knowingly make any immoral exhibition or indecent exposure of his or her person. I think that's pretty straightforward. Any questions about that one?
I'm assuming it has a legal definition and it's not just sort of a value judgment.
What obscene is?
Yeah, like I'm assuming there's a legal definition of obscene and it's not just
correct, like Mr. Yaden?
Well, actually, it is a value judgment, but by law, it's a neighborhood value judgment. So the jury is basically instructed if it's an immoral or indecent exposure based on community standards. That comes from a number of court decisions in this area.
Okay.
Babcock. Councilmember Babcock.
It's obscenity that gave rise to the famous Potter Stewart line, "I know it when I see it." So
yeah.
it is subjective. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, obscenity. So let's go on to firearms. Discharge any firearms, air rifle, or slingshot, nor shall any person have any air rifle or slingshot in his possession in any street or park, except the same be securely wrapped or encased. So BB guns, air rifles. Councilmember Stevens.
Yeah, so I did have one note on this, and I'm going to preface my entire conversation around all of these things by saying I'm not looking for necessarily an answer of we would never do something like that or we would never arrest somebody for something like that. All I'm looking at is like literally what is written down in our ordinance. And so I just want to put that preface down before I get into each of these. But, slingshot, air rifle, that kind of thing. Obviously, I am very much against discharging firearms or discharging any of those items out in the public. But having air rifle or slingshot in the possession in any street, not park, but any street, except the same to be securely wrapped or encased. I just go back to, some cases we've seen years back where, kid would have a toy gun. And it didn't end up well. So I just want to put that as a plug, just saying that in his or her possession when it comes to like air rifle or slingshot, I think is a subjective thing that we should be looking out for in terms of bias.
So you're thinking that maybe we want to take out slingshot and air rifle?
I'm not necessarily saying that we need to take it out. I didn't have a change written to this one specifically because I didn't necessarily know how to word it, but I just think we need to be cognizant of previous events that have happened in this country in regards to that.
Okay, peeping in windows or any inhabited place, pretty straightforward. Swim or bathe in the nude, can't do that.
Clarification, council member, why is number 5 reserved? Is that just because we didn't want to renumber it at one point?
I don't know.
Yes, we've taken out, there's a number of provisions that have been removed, and rather than trying to retrain the police on every section number that they get accustomed to, we just reserve the section.
Okay, cool, thanks.
All right, number 7, this is the accosting, molesting, or annoying with intent to interfere with or abuse a person or culpably offend his or her dignities or sensibilities.
Yeah, I had a general one that was just along kind of all of these lines that we just use gender neutral terms. Actually, that accounts for number 2 as well and a few others down here. But we did that with a couple of different ordinances in the past, and I think that that's probably a good thing to do.
So we just use there?
Yeah. And in number 2, and there's a couple others as well that I can get to. But.
I just for point of communication, I have sort of a aversion to raising annoyance to a criminal offense. I mean, I do realize, that includes touching or word of mouth, but that's like, that seems pretty harsh for annoying.
But it's not just annoying. It's annoying with intent to interfere with or abuse, right? That's all read together.
Annoying with intent. I don't know.
Even there, this is totally subjective. So there's a real opportunity to abuse this and use it as a pretextual way of stopping someone. That guy, really bugs me down there, and then suddenly we have an arrest that we don't really want to have. So
this one
I
seems
think this language could be tightened up significantly and still get across the point that you can't just go up to somebody and start to abuse them verbally, even.
Now, Councilmember Babcock is patiently raising her hand and following the rules. Councilmember Babcock.
I agree with
I raised my
Councilmember-
hand too, by the way.
I agree with Councilmember Meadows, and I think perhaps, and again, I don't know whether there's a legal definition, but harass might be better than annoy. Might be worth looking into. Thank you.
Okay, so this might be one that we can tighten it up so that it can't be used just to deal with somebody that people don't like. Okay, the next one, we get to say defecate in a public meeting, my favorite thing to do. Urinate, defecate, or spit on any street, sidewalk, or upon any public, you guys can read this, or upon private property. Councilmember Meadows patiently raises.
Thank you. I do have a whole list of things I'd like to see changed in this ordinance, and I'll ship them out after we finish our discussion, but we got to take spit out of here.
Yeah, that was mine.
I assume this was written in 1890 when people spit tobacco onto the sidewalks or something, but I don't think spit belongs in here.
Yes, I agree with that. I had that in there.
I have Councilmember Babcock and then Councilmember Gregg.
But COVID, and also expectorate might be a better phrase. Thank you.
Councilmember Gregg.
Yeah, if spitting is illegal in East Lansing, then I've got about 50 frat boys that I see on their way to 7-Eleven every day to report for criminal spitting. So yeah, I think that's a little outdated.
Councilmember Stevens.
Councilmember Meadows, I appreciate you put it in there. That was one of the first ones that I had edited, and honestly, it is a perfect example of why we needed to look at this ordinance, where you know, you look at something and you say, I don't know if we should have that in there. So,
In other words,
yeah.
you agree. Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else on pooping, spitting, urinating? All right. Councilmember Babcock.
I do agree that it could go. I just wanted to use the word expectorate. Thank you.
You're easier to please than me. I have to have a little bit more powerful of a word. All right. Number 8, disturb the public peace.
There's number 9.
Sorry, number 9, disturb the public peace and quiet by loud or boisterous conduct or by engaging in any disturbance, fight, brawl, or quarrel in any public place. I think this one is used a lot. Councilmember Stevens and Councilmember Meadows.
I'd like to just have disturbance out of there. I think that, you know, when you talk about disturbing the peace and quiet by loud or boisterous conduct, that can be used in many different ways. And I originally had just disturbance out of there. If somebody has another suggestion for the wording of the first part of that sentence, I'm more than happy to hear it. But at this point, what I had was removing disturbance.
So what would it read then, Aaron? Or
Disturb
Mr.
the
Meadows?
peace and quiet by loud or boisterous conduct by engaging in any fight, brawl, or quarrel in a public place.
All right, sorry, I thought you were talking about the other disturbance. Mr. Meadows.
I don't see disturbance as the issue here. I would rewrite this to read, disturb the public peace and quiet by engaging in any disturbance, fight, brawl, or quarrel in any public place. I think loud or boisterous conduct, we're back in the very subjective and possibly being used as a pretextual way of interacting with somebody.
So,
Yeah.
hang on a second. Mr. Yaden, are you still with us? I can't see you anymore because you're just
Yes,
because of my
I am.
screen. Okay, so I think what we're trying to do here is to tighten this up so it can't be used as a pretextual way to stop or arrest somebody. So you get the general idea of what we're trying to do, right, Mr. Yaden?
I do, and I can draft an ordinance with both options in it, and then council can decide which option they like best.
Okay, and Mr. Meadows, you'll send your ideas to Mr. Yaden?
I'll send it to everybody
Okay,
since we're
perfect.
talking about them at a public meeting anyway. So
All right,
I
so
think
I
Jesse
agree.
already has a copy of it.
I agree. I can't see you either, Lisa. If you're raising your hand, you're not on my screen anymore. So just go ahead and shout out, break the rules like everybody else.
Fine, thank you.
There you go. Now you're back. So I agree that this one is just too broad. Disturbing the public peace is just too broad for me. All right, number 10. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Greg.
So loudness, like criminal loudness, is covered under our noise ordinances, right? I mean,
Yes. I think the noise ordinance has more to do with machines that make noise, but I guess it would be people too. What do you say, Mr. Yaden?
Yes, the noise ordinance applies to people shouting and yelling.
so I think one of the things that we're trying to accomplish with this is like, is overcharging people. So like when somebody, okay, so there's a party, it gets wild, there's some shoving outside, so there's a noise complaint, but there's also a boisterous behavior complaint. If our police officers respond to that, how would that offense be charged out, or how have you seen those offenses charged out? Are they charged like doubly as disturbing the peace and also criminally like liable for their noise if it's after 11 p.m.? Like, are we seeing people charged with multiple offenses out of our ordinance for one single call?
No, not generally. There's not multiple offenses for one type of act.
Okay.
Generally, if there has to be multiple separate acts for separate offenses as a general rule throughout the code.
Okay, all right, thanks.
All right, moving on to number 10. Tom, would you just explain this? Because I don't know what for more people, whether when is it a riot? I mean, how is a protest march not considered a riot? All that.
Okay. The state law defines a riot at MCL 752.541. It's a 10-year felony, and a riot is defined as 5 or more persons acting in concert to wrongfully engage in violent conduct and thereby intentionally or recklessly cause or create a serious risk of causing public terror or alarm. So
That's a
when
much
we,
better definition.
yeah, so the language that you see there in paragraph 10 comes from the unlawful assembly language in the state statute, and that's a 5-year felony, so it's a half of the riot. So the first part of that, where it says assemble or act in concert with 4 or more other persons for the purpose of engaging in conduct constituting the crime of riot, or be present at an assembly that either has or develops such a purpose and remain thereat with intent to advance such purpose. So that language is taken direct, that's a copy of the 5-year felony under MCL 752.543 for the crime of riot. So we've actually made what's a felony under the state law a 90-day disorderly conduct offense under our code. And then we've, over the years in prosecuting these matters, there's been a lot of question and even some claims that people don't know that they're actually engaged in the riot. They were just there to watch, and they don't know that they were actually engaging in the riot. So we developed the sub list there of what the officers and what our office would consider remaining at the riot with intent to advance its purpose. So that's what you're seeing in subparagraphs, in the subparagraphs in that section, is letting people know that those acts, while committed during a riot, are going to be considered as remaining there with the intent to advance the purpose of a riot. Obviously, there would be a lot of First Amendment protections against any of that that's done separately, but in the midst of a riot, the law allows us to remove some what would otherwise be First Amendment protections in order to get control of the streets and ensure the public safety. So that's what those subsections are, is things, acts that we've seen during riots that we wanted to let people know would be considered part of the actual riot.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Meadows?
So this last provision, this, if they participate in the riot in any manner, including but not limited to committing or attempting to commit any of the following acts, that's language that we added to the state statute?
Correct.
Okay, then I do have some comments on this then.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. First of all, by saying including but not limited to, it means that virtually anything could be a violation of this. You know, especially in the midst of a riot, you could be, wiping the sweat off your brow, and it kind of fits into the language of this particular provision. Putting that aside, I'll just say that I would suggest that we delete C, which is meddling with any deployed riot control agent. That means tear gas. I think that it's probably a natural and normal thing that if a tear gas canister lands next to you, you're going to pick it up and throw it away someplace. So I don't know why that we would want to prosecute anybody for that. I deleted E in this particular proposal as well. And the
hang on, Mr. Meadows. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Gas mask, helmet, or protective clothing. I would think that for health reasons, more power to you if you're smart enough to have your gas mask on. And the as far as this wearing a mask, I'll just say coronavirus. I mean, I would expect that, I would hope that most of the people participating in any large demonstration are going to have their mask on. So I don't see why we would be prosecuting people for doing that when we are encouraging people to actually wear masks now. This is not 25 years ago when the wearing of a mask was actually a crime. So I think that we have to look at this. I deleted G, participating in chants or taunts directed towards the police. I think that's a First Amendment violation there. That, to me, that is something that we should not be prosecuting people for. You know, we have police who are trained to not get offended by what people say.
Well, not react at least.
And then I deleted the walking or running through a police line or otherwise. You know, I would think that, you know, there's going to be people who want to get out of there and they're going to go through police lines to get out. So I don't see how that should be a crime either. All of these things are, they're not necessarily protectual because they are connected with a riot situation, but they're not the part of the riot that is making the riot worse, as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. And I agree with Councilmember Meadows on a couple of these. I had a note on A. I remember my freshman year of college, although I was not there, I remember hearing stories about people getting arrested for throwing bagels after a basketball win. And one of those people lived on my floor. So I just, you know, throwing or propelling or causing to be propelled by an object, I know is a very wide range of things and it can result in a lot of injury. But in one case, it was actually used because of people throwing bagels that I think were provided by DTN for a breakfast thing at that time. I also had C removed, E removed, F removed, G removed. I did not have H, but I understand that reasoning. And under K,
Hang on a second. Can we get down to K?
Yeah, my bad.
But no, it's okay. Go ahead.
Sorry. And the actually N as well was cheering, applauding, or otherwise encouraging any of the conduct. Sorry, I didn't mean to say under K as in it was a subsection, but cheering or applauding, I think that that's, you know, something that it's just way too subjective in those kind of cases. And then, you know, refusing or failing to leave a public street or sidewalk after an order to do so is given by a police officer under I. You know, am worried about that just because, you know, in certain cases where you have a lot of people in that certain situation, the timeline via understanding that everybody needs to leave is, you know, maybe a little bit out there, and police might be dealing with, you know, a couch on fire in the middle rather than, you know, everybody on the outskirts still there. So I just, you know, I'm cognizant of that, but I do agree with all the other ones that, oh, Councilmember Meadows had something. Note on that.
Councilmember Meadows. I got you, Mr. Lahannis.
I didn't get to the second page, so
Okay.
I deleted J and deleted returning to a street from K. I deleted N, which is cheering or applauding. And I agree with Councilmember Stevens' analysis of these other ones. With regard to with regard to I, we do have, as I recall anyway, as a result of the Riot Commission and the adoption of policies in 2006 or 2007 by council, there is a requirement that there be a audible notification to people that they must leave a particular area. I don't think it shows up in this ordinance, but that is a policy requirement for us to move forward in clearing a crowd from any location. So that sort of takes care of your worry, I think, with regard to I.
Mr. Lahannis, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. So I just want to mention that perhaps on some of these, we might want to hear, after it's drafted, hear a response from the chief, not right now, but in writing, about why some of these might be important. We have a long history of trying to manage these events safely and to be able to move people out of the way so that there's not harm, so there's not injuries, so there's not destruction of property. Just for instance, moving through the police line, in a lot of ways can lead to someone getting hurt. If people charge the police line, I don't necessarily think that's a great idea. But I think that's something that perhaps we want to hear from the chief, so council can consider that information, because it is entirely possible we have these events again. We had one about a year ago, or was it 2 years ago now? They kind of blend together, and they're difficult to manage for the officers. It puts a lot of pressure on people to try to manage these things safely. And if people are engaging in conduct that's getting everyone riled up, I think that's something that we have to consider what the police have to deal with.
So what I was thinking, Mr. Lahannis, is that we could have a red line version of this with Mr. Yaden's best efforts at trying to get to where we're trying to go, which is a little bit less policing. More, you have to get to a higher level before you can get arrested. And then I would like to have the chief there to talk about all of these. I think that's a reasonable way to do it, because we shouldn't make decisions without hearing about why these things are there in the first place. Mr. Meadows, I saw your hand.
I agree with that completely. I figured that we were talking about this tonight, but that we would have an analysis as to why some things should stay in there. I just want to note that in the 2005 riot, everybody who was trying to leave that area was prohibited from leaving the area, which made the whole incident worse and worse as the night went on. So trying to get through police lines to escape, to get back on campus for a lot of people turned into just a little nightmare for the entire city. So I think that's the reason I think that needs to be sort of reduced or changed in some way.
And Mr. Yaden, it could well be that the chief would like to work with us on these too. I mean, if he can think of a way to achieve these kinds of things without actually having an arrest, that would be fine. So maybe if you want to work with the chief, or however you would.
Yeah, we could have a recommendation from the chief and staff as well. Just to sort of council consider that and consider the whys of why they're important.
But what I would prefer is to have all that prepared before we talk about this. So, and not have it be in opposition. So, you know what I mean, George? So if you could work, you and staff.
But just maybe different alternatives, right? Because I don't want to change your language by what the chief may think, but maybe we have two different alternatives in the whys, and then you can sort of see the logic of it and say, I don't agree, we'll go with our language, or yeah, I agree, we'll go with what the staff recommended, or something like that. Does that work?
Yep, that works.
Okay.
All right, so let's go on to Mr. Stevens' favorite one, jostling or roughly crowd, jostle or roughly crowd persons at any street, alley, park, or public building. Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, I would say we just need, I don't want this in here anymore. I'd say that we have a clause in this that has disturbed the peace. And honestly, one of the reasons why, and I really do appreciate Councilmember Meadows' comments on number 9, that is the disturb the peace one, because I didn't really know how to word this in the best way, but I think that we do need something in there for engaging in a fight in a public place, brawl. And that's why I didn't want to eliminate number 9, but number 11, I think is way too subjective. And I can't have a reason why that should be in there. So I would like to see that gone.
Specifically, if this were gone, we might not have had the Gestito arrest at all, because there wasn't a fight. There was just jostling. When I asked what the crime was, and an officer told me jostling, I thought that he was kidding, but no, it was serious. Mr. Meadows.
I completely agree with that. I had eliminated 11 and 12, so I know we're coming up on that.
I was going to get to that next, but yes.
Wait. Anybody else on 11?
Yes.
Yeah, I couldn't see you.
Yes.
So go ahead.
Lisa,
Yell out.
Okay, I've got to stand up for my good friend jostling. I realized that it was a problem in the Gestito case, but I have handled a lot of cases that started out as assaultive charges that were then pled down to jostling, where something happened, and something worse than the Gestito case. And the way we got rid of it was by using jostling. So then when someone went through life after doing some pretty gnarly damage to another human being, when they were asked in a job interview, one young man wanted to be a teacher. He did some damage, real damage to another kid in a bar. Felony charges. We got him down to jostling, the state version, but this would work. And so when he had to answer questions about his teaching licensure, he was able to say, yeah, I got in a bar fight and it was jostling. That jostling is really important when you deal with assaultive crimes.
Thank you. Councilmember Gregg.
So if I'm following Lisa's logic here, leaving jostling in our code creates a lesser crime for them to plead to?
Correct, lesser included. I'm sorry, Mayor.
So, but look, I mean, and I understand there's legal precedent and there's reasons for using specific words, but like, to me, that would be covered under our number 7, accost, molest, or otherwise annoy, although I'm still annoyed that annoying people is illegal. So I'm like, pleading to accosting different than pleading to jostling. I don't like having laws in our code that we don't intend to enforce or that we intend to use differently than, you know, in a way that is like, I don't know. I understand, you know, I'm the daughter of a defense attorney as well. I do understand that there's precedent for things like that, but.
Okay, before I go to Councilmember Babcock and Councilmember Stevens, I want to ask Mr. Yaden. Mr. Yaden, do we need this here to be able to plead down to something lower, or can you do that with different sections here?
We could do that with different sections.
That answer everybody's question? Councilmember Babcock.
Again, though, I would much rather have a client who pled to jostling than molest or accost, particularly molest.
Yep. Noted. Councilmember Stevens?
I mean, this is probably a dumb question, but I mean, is there a way to word that so it is just as a strictly pled down measure? I mean, I don't think that that's possible, but I mean, I agree with Councilmember Gregg. Like, I just, as a reason for arrest, I'm not comfortable with that, you know, just being in there in general. I mean, I understand what Councilmember Babcock's trying to say, and actually that makes a lot of sense to me. I can't put the one over the other in that certain situation.
Okay, moving on to Councilmember Meadows, Councilmember Stevens.
I understand what Councilmember Babcock is trying to get at here, but generally speaking, if it's a lesser included offense, yeah, I mean, basically the city attorney's office presumably could use any one of these provisions as, I'm going to alternately have you plead to X in order to reduce the charges on somebody.
Yep, that's why I asked him that question. Councilmember Babcock.
Yes, they could, but again, it's just worth considering that when you go into something like the military or a licensing situation where you have to tell them what you were convicted of and they look up the language, jostling is pretty clearly understood to be a nonsense thing, whereas molest, at least in my context, I hear molest and I'm thinking about a level of sexual offense.
The problem with all of this, Councilmember Babcock, is what we're trying to do is take out options that the police can use to stop people who don't need to be stopped. And jostling is one of those. In my view, I don't want the police to intervene in a Gestito type situation until somebody gets punched, or when they want to prevent somebody from being punched, which they did. But the impetus for them walking into the 7-Eleven in the first place, they said, or walking toward the 7-Eleven, was jostling. And they were serious about it. So in my view, there was no reason to walk toward the 7-Eleven until there was an actual fight. I have Councilmember Stevens and then Councilmember Babcock.
Yeah, and just as a side note, I think if number 9 is worded correctly when you're talking about fighting, I think that would probably be an option to plead down, you know, because if we're talking about both my own comments and Councilmember Meadows' comments, number 9 might read disturb the peace and quiet by engaging in any fight, brawl, or quarrel in any public place, getting rid of both loud and boisterous conduct and getting rid of the word disturbance. I think would constitute a lesser offense of what could be a bar fight.
Oh, sorry.
Agreed. I mean, nine is good. I still, just based on experience, think jostling is better. But until that case, I had never seen jostling actually charged. It was there, it's a placeholder. And frankly, there's no reason that they couldn't have. I'm going to try to proceed carefully here, but you know my skepticism about using the shove in 7-Eleven as a jostling rather than a fight. If you hit the ground, it was not, well, I think there was there were judgment calls made that I am not comfortable with, but we digress.
Right.
So thank you.
All right. Let's go on to number 12. Loiter, remain. Oh, Councilmember Stevens, I'm sorry. Are we still jostling?
Nope, this is on number 12.
Oh, good. Loiter, remain, or wander in a place without apparent reason. Councilmember Stevens.
Yep, so I want this one gone. This one is really, really worrisome that we have it in our code. I think that actually, I was just having a conversation about this with the Pinecrest Neighborhood Association. The mayor said it before, don't call the police on people that are just walking their dogs, doing normal things. And the fact that we have this in our code is a pure example of a situation in which that can be used in a not great way. The wording that really scares me in this is both without apparent reason and endeavor to conceal oneself upon inquiry of a police officer refuse to identify himself or herself. And I just, every situation that you see where somebody comes up to you and you're walking down, I mean, heck, I've had this situation when I'm knocking doors. Not in this community, granted, but I had this situation happen exactly to me where I know somebody called the police because a young brown kid was walking down the street with a clipboard, and the police asked me to identify myself. And I said, no. I said, I'm doing something that's completely legal. I'm knocking on people's doors. This is my right. And under this provision, I mean, luckily nothing happened beyond that, but under this provision, I could have gotten arrested because of that. And that's scary. So I want this thing gone.
Or Babcock.
Mr. Stevens and I don't always do things the same way, but let me just say, and having spoken to a neighbor who is the parent of African-American kids, Mr. Stevens, for the love of God, yes, I couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Okay, anybody disagree with that? All right, let's move on to number 13. Knowingly attend, frequent, operate, or loiter in and about a place where prostitution, gambling, and the illegal sale of intoxicating liquor, blah, blah, blah. So this is not just doing prostitution, doing illegal sale, or doing illegal gambling. It's attending and frequenting those places.
Or loitering near them, which
Yeah, I would say it's or loitering, which
yeah. So when I first read this, I thought, okay, if we're going to keep prostitution and gambling and illegal selling of liquor or drugs as a crime, then that should be the crime. But attending and frequenting and operating, I mean, how would they even know? Mr. Stevens.
So I had originally written getting rid of the phrase frequent and getting rid of the phrase loiter in there. Knowingly attend or operate. Well, actually, and now that I'm saying it out loud, operate would be then said operate in or about any place for prostitution. And I had originally read that as operating that. So I might, yeah, I mean, I just, I'm cognizant of the fact that just being in an area, whether you know it or not, could constitute, this. And I know it says knowingly, but that's subjective. So.
Councilmember Gregg and then Councilmember Babcock.
I think my same question that I repeated earlier is like, isn't this covered by other parts of our code, attending, and so I guess if we know of a place where illegal gambling, which sounds like it came straight out of like, I don't know, whatever.
Elliot Ness.
But if we have a gambling den in East Lansing and people are frequenting it, then does this give us the option to charge them either with frequenting a gambling establishment or disorderly conduct, and then we get to choose, or do we charge them with both of them? if it's a redundant thing with a different part of our code that has a crime associated with it, then let's just charge them with the crime of gambling, right? Not disorderly conduct.
Councilmember Babcock.
Agreed. But again, this is one of the great lesser includeds. And speaking from the state level and dealing with a different city that had its misdemeanors, this is really useful when you have someone who is using drugs, or a low-level seller has, say, a dozen joints on them. Something like this allows you to give them a plea that is not a drug conviction. And so what happens there is if you get a drug conviction, you can lose your financial aid, collateral consequences, or, I'm sorry, I know we're televised, but as I would say, tell my clients, other bad stuff that can happen to you. By having this here, some form of this, I am not wedded to this, but it allows you to use it as a lesser included when bigger things have gone on. It also allows you to deal with the crowds that gather in your neighborhood when you have an entity like this. This is not an East Lansing experience, but I can tell you, I owned a home for 20 years where we had a lot of problems in a good neighborhood, a strong neighborhood, a great diverse neighborhood, but we had that one house and people would hang out where they would just sit there for hours. They would park their cars on the street. This allows you to attach something that doesn't have other horrendous long-term consequences that can relieve the problem, which can be a very real problem. So thank you.
Councilmember Meadows.
Okay, this is, I read this as a specific intent crime, so it isn't subjective. You know, there must be evidence that the individual knew what they were associated with here. But it also is gang related, because what generally happens is that a crack house or other establishments like that will have a number of people there. Some of them are not users. What they are is protectors, and they're there for a specific purpose. So this, taking this away, I think does impact us. I'm not saying that we have crack houses in East Lansing. Thank God, I don't think we do. But it is possible that we have blind pigs or other establishments like that, and that the people there are not just people going to drink. They're people to enforce while other people are there. So this gives us an opportunity to grab those people as well.
Okay, so I think this one's going to take a little bit more thought from everybody. Could we go on to 14? All right, 14, solicit or accost any person for the purpose of engaging in prostitution or any illegal or immoral act. Mr. Yaden, I had a question about this. I can't see you. I assume you're still there. So prostitution we can't make. So is prostitution a crime other than just disturbing the peace, or what part of this ordinance in East Lansing?
Not under a city ordinance, no.
Okay. So if we don't have to have this, would it be legal to have prostitution in East Lansing?
No, it would still be a violation of the state statute.
Why do we need this?
I've never prosecuted this in my 30 plus years of doing police work here.
Okay, so I don't think we need it, but.
It's a good point.
All right, anybody else? Number 15, knowingly transport any person to a place where prostitution or gambling is practiced, encourage or allow for the purposes of enabling such person to engage in such acts. God, this sounds like it comes from 1945. Yes, Mr. Meadows.
I had this actually removed on the thing I sent out. I think everybody's got a copy now. But I changed my mind on this. Because how I look at this is that this is actually the way that we arrested John, somebody who picks up a prostitute and then transports them to another location in order to engage in prostitution. And that person, I mean, that's the bread and butter of prostitution. So that is the way that we prohibit or prevent prostitution.
Okay. All right. Can we go to the next one? 16. Gaming room, gaming table, pool tickets, gaming. I guess this is gambling or any game whatsoever. Do we have any of this, Mr. Yaden?
No, Your Honor, I have never prosecuted a violation of this.
I guess we can keep it then because it doesn't hurt, but. All right, anybody 17, knowingly permit or suffer any place occupied, disturb the public peace. Yeah, so what is this and why is this different than the other public peace? Mr. Yaden?
I think that this is like the property owner type provision where you can't allow your property to be a nuisance type of a situation.
Wouldn't this apply to every landlord in East Lansing?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, it has the knowingly aspect, so it is a specific intent crime. So you would have to know that you were allowing this. But again, I don't think that this is frequently used either. Our noise violation is used more, and then our nuisance party violation is used more if it's an actual nuisance party.
We probably don't need this one.
You know, I'd defer to the chief on that probably, but I don't recall prosecuting this a lot.
Okay, no hands. 18, assault a police officer or oppose any member of the police force, any peace officer or firefighter in the discharge of his or her duties as such. Mr. Stevens.
I know that Councilmember Meadows also had something. Actually, Councilmember Meadows can go first. I have a few thoughts on this.
I had this deleted only because I think it needs to be reworked, rewritten. I think we should have a prohibition against an assaulting a police officer, but there were parts of this that I thought were a little loose. Oppose any member of the police force, any peace officer or firefighter. I don't know what that means. Assault is one thing. It's very clear, and it's clear that we should prohibit that. But oppose doesn't have any meaning for me. That is totally subjective, and that can be a pretextual type of interaction, I think.
Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, no, I agree with what Councilmember Meadows just said. I mean, I think that this does definitely need to be reworked. I did not have a writing for it because I understand the need to have something in there that says, you know, assaulting a member of the police force or firefighters in the discharge of, and again, gender neutral term, their duties. However, opposing, I didn't understand. And I think that I don't need to say the conversation, but I mean, you know, we can all have a longer conversation on resisting in the discharge of their duties as a very wide range of things. So I'm not saying there's no need for it. I'm just saying that when we're talking about over policing in certain areas, that this definitely can be used as one.
Can you work on that, Mr. Yaden?
I will.
Councilmember, thank you. Councilmember Babcock.
Let's ditch as such. That adds nothing. It might expand it too much. Thank you.
Okay, we are on number 19, prowling without authority. Mr. Stevens.
Does alley count for public alleys?
Yeah. Except for it says or the private premise. Yeah, that'd be public alleys. Yeah.
I mean, well, I just want that out. I mean, I understand like trespassing, I suppose. Actually, I do have a question on that. Tom, is trespassing still another crime that's not this 19 in our disorderly conduct ordinance?
Yes, I believe it is a later provision.
Okay. hold on. Then I might head back to this in a sec. But if you know, trespassing already, and again trespassing, you know, we might need to look at like what our ordinance is on that. But this one just didn't feel right with me when it said prowl about any alley as a person in the nighttime. I mean, there's a lot of people that are walking down an alley when they're headed out from a bar, or they're just taking a walk, you know.
Right. And I think trespassing on the private premises of another person is fine, but prowling without authority, what is that? Prowling in an alley, I agree. It's just too easy for somebody to call and say, hey, there's a black man prowling in my alley. And then badness happens. So I agree.
And as the public body, I give full permission based on this to anybody to walk throughout our alleys in the nighttime in East Lansing, but I do want it removed, just as a note.
Okay, number 20. Summon as a joke or prank or otherwise without any good reason, therefore, by telephone or otherwise, the police or fire department or any public ambulance to go to an address where the service call is not needed. Yes, Mr. Stevens.
So this one, I don't have anything written down on it, but I did want to note that we've talked about before, and other cities have talked about when it comes to calling the police on black and brown people for just doing random things, such as having a barbecue, walking their dog, going to their car, moving in, number of different things. And if we wanted to have that conversation,
that wouldn't be, yeah, that not in this ordinance though, right?
Yeah, I'm just saying that I'm open to that.
Councilmember Babcock actually has a resolution idea for that we're either going to talk about on the 23rd or at the retreat. Councilmember Meadows.
Yeah, I rewrote this just to say summoned by telephone or otherwise the police or the fire department or any public or private ambulance to go to any address where the service called for is not needed. So I think the you know, the whole idea of you know, the way that it was worded originally as a joke or prank, I don't know why we would have that in there. So it is just wrong to do that.
Councilmember Gregg.
I guess my interpretation of having joke or prank in there is just to, you know, I think it's possible to summon the police or fire to an address where they're not needed unknowingly because you thought they were needed. And so there might be legitimate confusion, although, you know, we always want people to do those things seriously. I think including the prank in it was just kind of to add some protection from people who might just have done it. I don't know. Anyway, that was my reading.
We could use knowingly. Will you work on that, Mr. Yaden?
Yes, I will.
Thank you. All right, next, wrongfully. I'm sorry, Mr. Meadows, are you on this one? Wrongfully throw or propel any snowball, missile, or object from an automobile, Mr. Meadows.
I struck 21 and 22. So I think that this is like impossible to prove. So I don't see why we are going to criminalize snowball fights. Let's not do that.
So I've been driving down the road and I got hit with a snowball on my windshield and almost killed somebody as a result. So would that be illegal somewhere else, Mr. Yaden?
It would not.
So we can't let people throw snowballs at cars, Mr. Meadows. It is dangerous.
21 is from a moving vehicle.
No, I was looking at, you said 22 as well. Toward a person or automobile.
But you would keep automobile in there.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Person, okay. Except for it says missile or object. I don't want people throwing missiles at each other either.
That's used in the generic sense.
Yeah. So I know we're trying to get rid of things, but I really don't want people throwing, we could take out, I don't want people throwing things at each other. I want it to be illegal. Is it illegal anywhere else if you throw a rock at somebody else, Mr. Yaden?
Potentially it's an assault charge where we have an assault provision as well.
Snowball would be an assault as well, wouldn't it, Tom?
It could be, but I think that there has to be an intention for harm and an assault, not just somebody who doesn't want to play in the snowball fight.
Yeah, and I'm worried about the snowball in the car, or a rock in the car, or a rock at the windshield. Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, maybe this is one that, Tom, if you wouldn't mind attempting to reword. The only part of this that I'm cognizant of is glass object onto a public street or sidewalk. You know, I don't know how you would be able to. You'd have to be in the very right place at the right time, and I'm not necessarily thinking that needs to be something as out there as disorderly conduct to put a misdemeanor on it. But obviously, you know, having glass on sidewalks is not a good thing, and you know, it could hurt some folks and stuff. But
that would be littering anyway, wouldn't it, Mr. Yaden? Couldn't we get that person for littering?
Yeah, but that's a civil infraction. I would point out that these both say wrongfully throwing, so your typical snowball fight is not covered by this ordinance because it's a participant game, you know, amongst kids. So it's the throwing snowballs or objects at people who don't want them thrown at them, or vehicles that don't want them thrown at them.
Yeah, I know you don't think these are big deals, but I think they are big deals. These are actual dangerous things. Mr. Meadows, then Councilmember Gregg.
Just in response to that, I would say really the objective here is to eliminate the pretextual possibility of it. So rewording this and making it more direct and not allowing it to be pretextual. I mean, even the word wrongfully is open to interpretation. So it allows a police officer to stop somebody and perhaps arrest them in a way that is just an excuse. So,
Councilman, who did I say next? Councilmember Gregg, and then Councilmember Stevens.
I think my point kind of dovetails with Mark's a little bit, is just judging from the amount of broken glass on sidewalks in the 400 block of Grove Street, I would say breaking beer bottles on sidewalks is high entertainment at a certain level of drunkenness, but it's completely unenforceable. You would have to have somebody literally standing over it while it was happening. And so any enforcement of this law is going to be complete hearsay by the time the officer gets there. And so that just invites the kind of mischief that we are trying to remove from the code. So I don't think, like, I don't know how to address your concern, Ruth, that you don't want to, you know, that you want to actively discourage people from throwing dangerous things at each other, while also kind of addressing the fact that any report of this is going to involve an officer showing up on the scene, you know, anything more than seconds later, there's not going to be any chance of determining who threw that. And so it just kind of invites this, like, I don't know. That's not a complete point, but that's all I had to say.
Stevens?
Yeah. Thanks. So I think that I can try to sum this up in the best way possible. So Tom, I think the only concern that we have from council members at this point, and I will say that it's something that I hadn't thought of, but it you know, makes sense to consider, is the mayor's concern with throwing something at a moving vehicle that could hinder or obstruct and result in harm, basically, like obstructing view or obstructing that driver. So if we strike these two and add something else that says basically what she's intending behind an automobile, that I don't know how you'd word it. I'm okay with having that conversation, but I do agree with Councilmember Gregg, and I was trying to allude to before, is I don't know how this would be enforceable. And I think that leads to a little bit of subjective cases. I again, not saying that this has ever been actually used to arrest somebody, but you know.
You work on that, Mr. Yaden?
I will.
Okay, Mr. Stevens, will you take over for me for 5 minutes, please?
Absolutely. Okay. So do we have any other comments on 21 or 22? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to 23, which is discharge a fire extinguisher in public or on the premises on the residence of another without permission from the owner or occupant.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Yeah.
I just was muted. I couldn't get in quick enough.
Oh,
So I
sure.
just wanted to mention that we have gotten quite a few complaints over years about glass being in the downtown on the bike path. So
Yeah.
people breaking glass bottles onto sidewalks and onto bike paths is something that we get complaints about, and it causes quite a bit of frustration. And then we have to do specific street sweeping to keep the glass clear of those on Mondays after weekends. So it is something that causes us cost. It is something that causes frustration for residents if they're riding bikes, and something that if officers do observe someone purposely breaking glass bottles onto a sidewalk or street, I do think that that's something that you might want to consider. Then it wouldn't really be a pretextual case if someone is intentionally breaking glass onto a sidewalk or street. But
I
just pointing
understand
that
that. Councilmember Greg, you had a comment?
No, I'm 100% in favor of less broken glass downtown. I deal with it like biking to work. I deal with it walking in the neighborhoods. My question kind of is, has having this in our code ever led to, less glass downtown? I just don't. Yeah, unless an officer was literally standing over them when they broke a beer bottle onto the sidewalk, I don't see how it could be enforced. So there's litter, there's the party litter ordinance, there's other things that kind of address that. And I just having this specifically related to disorderly conduct, has it ever demonstrably led to less broken glass? But because there's a lot of it and it is a problem. Absolutely.
Thanks. And yeah, I would say the same thing. And I made that comment earlier that the one part of these two that I was cognizant of really was the glass object onto the public street or sidewalk. I know that is a danger, and that's definitely a concern. I do worry about enforceability. And I think Councilmember Greg probably put my thoughts into a good perspective. So I think that if there's a way to word it so it's better, but I don't see that is something that's really helping the cause right now, at least. So, but I appreciate that, Mr. Lahanas. Okay, moving on to 23. I did read it out one more time, but everybody can see it on the screen. Are there any comments on this one? And Lisa, I'm trying to find you. All right. Okay. All righty. So I mean, I guess then we'll move on to number 24. Sorry, I'm just trying to go back and forth to make sure I'm seeing everybody. Maliciously telephone any other person for the purpose of harassing, molesting, threatening, intimidating, or annoying such other person or his or her family, whether or not the conversation ensues. I'm looking for council member comments, if you have any. Lisa, go ahead.
Again, I could see being used as a lesser included in a domestic violence situation, which doesn't stick someone with a domestic violence conviction, but I'm not wedded to it. I know that I've used the state statute version of this to get a much lower conviction for someone, but I don't know that the city needs to do that. Thank you.
Councilmember Greg, did you have something?
It's been a while since I got a heavy breather phone call. They are irritating. I'm not sure they're disorderly conduct. If it rises to the level of harassment, do we have other parts of our code that would address like stalking type phone calls where a single person is repeatedly calling somebody else for the intent of scaring or harassing them?
Tom, I'm looking to you.
Not specifically as a general nature. We did adopt an ordinance not too long ago where it was more of a, we adopted it so it was illegal on private property because we had a situation where a neighbor was harassing another neighbor and we didn't really have a way to do it, shining headlights in their house, and just, doing all sorts of obnoxious stuff to the neighbor just to harass them. So we adopted a provision for that, but this was probably more relevant in the past when not everybody had a phone that they could turn off
Caller
You
ID.
know, so we used to prosecute this more often in the back, past, where people would just call somebody incessantly and hang up. And then we'd
Yeah.
have traces where we'd be able to trace their number and find out who it was coming from and charge them. But probably more so in the days before cell phones, where you can control it more now.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, as long as the possibility of harassing phone calls is covered somehow under stalking, then I don't think it's necessary to have it in the disorderly conduct. But that type of phone call is deeply unpleasant. So
Yeah.
All right, number 25, making a false report by telephone or otherwise to any public official which may be reasonably expected to cause the evacuation of, so this is the fake bomb scare.
Yep.
Probably need that one. 26, falsely impersonate a police officer, firefighter, or person, blah, blah, blah. Anybody have a problem with 26? Okay, 27.
I'm here.
Sorry, Mr. Meadows, bigger hand.
What I did is I took out falsely. I mean, falsely impersonate as opposed to impersonate. Presumably that means that it's okay to impersonate a police officer at some other time. So I just deleted falsely. I do think that we probably should reword this in some way, because I think there was an attempt here to list everything that could be bad if you're impersonating a police officer, but I think it should be including but not limited to these items that are in here, because I think there are other things that can happen here. And police or individuals have used that to rob people on the street. All kinds of things can happen with impersonation of a police officer.
Okay, number 27. So this is the minor child. Does anybody have problems with that one?
well, I just have, kind of a question about so this is having a child, so this is not some sort of molestation accusation, and it's not a kidnapping accusation. It is just I'm absolutely not in favor of random people picking up children off the street. I'm just wondering why this specifically got included in disorderly conduct as opposed to like a kidnapping.
Yeah, my understanding is that this is the kind of attempt version of that. So if someone was asking children to come into their vehicle and they run away and call the police, this gives us an ability to stop that person and charge that person, even though they didn't actually.
So an invitation, even if it is not successful, is enough to prosecute under this wording? Okay,
That's what
cool.
its intent is.
Yeah, I'm good with it. Babcock's got a question.
All right, 28 is reserved. 29.
Councilmember Babcock.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't see you, Councilmember Babcock. Just yell. There
Okay.
you go.
Just one thought. As loathsome as that behavior is, that's something we may be able to strike because, years ago, harassment, sexual harassment, inducing, threatening women and particularly children wasn't regarded as severely as it is now. This is probably covered by state statute, and there's probably an acceptable misdemeanor under it. At the state level, I find it hard to believe that a complaint of someone trying to coax a child into a stranger's vehicle investigated by ELPD would be treated as a misdemeanor for prosecution by the city anyway, but I'm open for discussion.
Okay, so why don't we just leave this one as it is and see if Mr. Yaden has any ideas about that one when we get to it next time. So 28 is reserved. 29. Lying to police officer. Oh, it's about somebody else. Okay. Anybody have anything on here?
Well, I just, you are not required to identify yourself to a police officer, right?
Yeah.
So this, I mean, like, you are allowed to say, no, thank you, if they ask you for identification.
Well, that's why the end of that talks about if the person is detained for a violation of the law or appearance ticket issuance or has an outstanding warrant. So those are the three circumstances where this comes into play. But you're correct. As a general rule, a police officer can't ask you for identification if you haven't done anything wrong.
Okay, but if he does, if they, sorry, gender neutral, if they do have a legitimate reason to be asking for your identification, you cannot furnish them with false ID. That
Correct.
seems fine.
Okay. Next page. Can I see the next page? There we go.
So
So-
this is ID stuff, more fake ID stuff.
Mr. Meadows.
We're at 30, right?
Yes.
I deleted it, but I just really have a question on this. This ends with the provision upon conviction for a violation of this subsection, furnishing or using fraudulent identification, the court shall order the suspension of the person's operator or chauffeur's license. The court shall immediately forward the suspended license and an abstract of conviction to the Secretary of State. I don't think we have the authority to do that in a city ordinance. So I'm wondering why this language is in here. Did we just take it from the state statute and it just remained in here? Because I think separation of powers would prevent us from, ordering the court to do something that maybe it decides it doesn't want to do.
General comment. I think we have too many attorneys. Mr. Yaden.
More artists.
Or artists.
Yeah,
Mr.
I think that language is in there because it was permitted under the state statute. So I can take a look at that and give you a better explanation, I think, when we reconvene on these.
Thanks.
Okay, 31. Who's doing that? Miss Bartel or Miss Gordon? Can you pull down 31? Okay. 300 feet of a fire. Oh, so can you talk a little bit about this one, Mr. Yaden? We're still using this one quite often, aren't we?
Actually, council changed it. The last time council changed it, I think it made it very difficult to prosecute anybody under this provision. So the fact of the matter is I've told police to not use this except in clear cases because of all of the caveats that are in there for what the person could have been doing and making it their conduct lawful as opposed to unlawful. So
can you rewrite it so it works that way? So instead of saying don't use this because of all these caveats, can you say let's use this only in this way? Does that make more sense?
Yes.
So I agree. We don't want to make it easier, but it seems like a lot of words to not be able to use it at all or very little. Mr. Meadows.
I think what Tom's referring to is we had a lawsuit involving this. And I think we added D. So if you look at D basically says, this really doesn't apply to anybody.
Right.
Basically. And so it probably does need a greater reworking than we did when we just decided to settle the case and take care of it with this D. Okay.
Right. So you'll work on that, Mr. Yaden?
I will.
I can see everybody now, by the way. I figured out my technology. All right, next page, 32. Intimidating, retaliating, testify. What is this all about, Mr. Yaden?
It's a retaliation provision. I think in the past, there's been cases where people have called in complaints against individuals and they have been harassed as a result of, complaining. So that's where this provision originated from.
So if I called because the party house up the street was too loud and then they came and threw eggs at my house, I would use this.
Yes, or there is a separate noise violation retaliation provision, so probably not for a noise complaint, but some other type of complaint.
Councilmember Babcock.
Harass, whatever.
Yeah. All right. The last one, I think, being an employee of a licensed liquor establishment, knowing allowed minutes. Okay, so this is the under 21. This is pretty important. Unless we want to somehow decriminalize drinking between 18 and 21, since everybody does it anyway. No.
Well, this point of question, just because, I don't habitually read city ordinances, but is this the way that selling to underage people is usually prosecuted as disorderly conduct?
It is a way, it gives the police officers an option not to make a liquor code violation for the conduct, but still give them some penalty. So you're not necessarily endangering their liquor license with this provision.
So what would be, why wouldn't we want to endanger their liquor license if they're knowingly selling to people who are under 21?
This is for the employees though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So it protects the business owner if they have employees.
One employee that's not.
Got it. Okay.
Councilmember Babcock.
Actually, that asked, answered, agreed. Thanks.
Okay, so is that the last one, Ms. Gordon? I believe it is. All right, can you give us back to full screen, please? Or get rid of that. Great, thank you. So that was very helpful for me anyway. I think I don't often like to go through every little section, but since what we're trying to do is decriminalize some things, I think we're going to have to read them all to make sure we don't do anything by accident. And I think giving this to, I have a fan on, giving this to Mr. Yaden to work on, given that intent, I think we'll get something that we can take some action on. All right, so the next item on my agenda is.
Mayor Byer.
Yes.
You had two council members, Greg first and then myself, that were wanting to speak on that.
I know, I was going to ignore you anyway. Just kidding, I didn't see you. Councilmember Greg.
No, I was just saying it is tedious to go through it like that, but I actually find it very helpful. I think there's not too many opportunities where we get to really feel out the other council members and how we feel about things. And I think, just part of us getting to know how to work together. And then also I do find this stuff productive. I think there's other parts of our code that should probably get gone through in the same way. I don't think we need to do the whole thing. And I don't think we need to do it right now, but I found that very productive. And I like your Beyonce hair, honorable.
Councilmember Stevens and Councilmember Babcock.
No, I agree with what Councilmember Greg said. I think this is a good thing. I'll be interested to see, based on kind of everything we went through, what this looks like after the fact and how many reserves there will be on this document. I think this is a good thing. I think that just based on some of the things that were listed here, I mean, it's just an example of what, we're part of the fight as well. When it comes to the policies that we set, we might be enabling some behavior that we don't want to see in our city. So I think this is really good. I think this is obviously a step in the right direction. It's not a full thing, but especially with this ordinances in general, I think we are. And I also want to make a comment regarding deterrence versus punishment. So I think, like, especially, with the glass on the sidewalk, I think either Councilmember Greg or Councilmember Babcock said it. Maybe Councilmember Greg said it fairly eloquently that, having the law there didn't necessarily deter people from doing it, but it could be used as in a not great situation of, hearsay. So I think that if there are other avenues to deter behavior that we can take, that's a great thing. But I think that, when what we're talking about right here with disorderly conduct is the ability to arrest somebody, the ability to charge somebody over something. And if it's not possible to do that, then I don't think we should be doing it. So that's my thing. Bye-bye.
Councilmember Babcock.
I also think this is valuable, and I think we should go through our city codes regularly as a matter of housekeeping, because I see some things in here that I am guessing date to earlier times or earlier circumstances, like the phone calls, that just as a matter of housekeeping, we should, as a council, pick a few sections every year, go through them and just review. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Meadows.
Actually, we're required to do that. I think we are required by the charter to do it every 10 years, which means I'm not sure when we revise the charter to add that requirement, but it might be this year that we have to recodify. Tom, I don't remember exactly when we have to do that, but we need to go through and have recommendations on what stays and what goes at that time. Tom?
We've already started the review process, but from staff perspective, and Mr. Yaden has talked to us about that as well. So I'm not sure we'll have to look at what the time frame is to get that to council, but.
Okay. Number 4.4, discussion of retreat planning. Mr. Lahanis.
So this is just an opportunity for us to hear what exactly council is looking for. I had a useful discussion with you, Mayor, in asking, do you want to have something where there's a discussion where council can have some sort of a facilitator present to talk about what sort of improvements or what sort of changes we can make to the city operation and the city can then implement for the community? Meaning, are we looking for strategic priority type opportunities? Or is this something where council wants to go through and have like an exercise where you get to have a training about implicit bias and that sort of thing? And you had said to me that you want to talk about what you can do to help improve the city through whatever it may be, ordinances, programs, initiatives, whatever it may be. And that's kind of what we're looking for, is just general direction from council on what you're looking for, kind of a general timeframe on when you'd like to see it. And then we can do our best to try to secure a facilitator that would be able to meet the needs of council and what you're looking for. If you want a facilitator, or if you think that staff can do it, we can certainly endeavor to try that as well.
So I will call on everybody. From my perspective, I would like a facilitator who is trained in getting what the group wants to do first, and then getting input to those things. Like, I've had really good facilitators that could narrow down, all right, what is your goal? And we haven't done that yet. We haven't decided that yet. So I think we definitely need that. And then I want it to be open. I want it to be, we could talk about ridiculous things that we might never do, and what's good and what's bad about those. So I don't want it to be closed, but I would like a facilitator to make us define our goal and move us toward that goal. Councilmember Gregg, this was your brilliant idea, which I think is a brilliant idea. Do you have any more to add here?
I think bringing in a facilitator that's trained with this kind of stuff is probably a very good idea. I think one of the things that came up with, I'm trying to remember, I've talked to so many people, which agency I was talking to. I think it was the Michigan Public Health Policy people. But I think, partially we need a conduit so that people can talk to us as well. So I think part of that retreat, I really would like to see certain community partners, people who are already doing the work that we say we want to do, to come in and talk to us about, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. I think we need to become aware of the work that's being done in the community and find a way to support it. And then if there's gaps that are left over that we can fill through some agency that we can either create or empower, then I think that's an important part as well. But I think partially, I just want us to be a better partner to our community and to our region. And so having a format where we can openly talk to each other about what our priorities are as individual council members, but then also invite other community agencies that are already doing this work to let, to inform our discussion. So
So do you see that like that maybe we have two of these, two half days, and the first half days it would be us with the facilitator, and then the second half day would be these are the places that are already doing some of our goals and how we might work with them. Would that be
Yeah, I
something?
think that would be great. I mean, I think, you know, the magnitude of this conversation is plenty to fill 2 half days. I mean, that,
Way
you
more.
know, I expect that I expect that we will feel like we have barely begun.
But we might not do 2 half days. We might do a half day every month for the rest of time. I mean, it's a big deal.
Yeah. Well, at that point, then I think we do need to talk about budget because facilitation is expensive. So, you know, if we're talking about having a $3,000 facilitated, you know, thing, that might not fit into our budget every month. So maybe we start with having a professional come in and teach us what we do not know, or at least open us up to what we do not know. And then, yeah, I'm absolutely in favor of any format going forward that, you know, enables us to continue this. But I think we have been told that we don't know what we're doing, which I think is true. So, you know.
So I'm just wondering now if this is somebody who is more skilled in goal setting and strategic type planning, or if this is someone who is skilled in diversity, equity, and inclusion, or if they're two separate people who do two separate parts of this.
They
You know
don't,
what I mean? One
they don't
person-
need, yeah, they don't need to be skilled in diversity, equity, and inclusion yet. I mean, that might be what we need later, but I want us to get to what do we want to do? So we want
Okay.
to, yeah. So, and I mean, it'd be best if it could be both, if you could find somebody like that.
I think, yeah, I don't want to separate diversity and inclusion from the conversation from the beginning. I think that definitely.
No, the conversation's all about diversity and inclusion and,
Yes.
and preventing bad things from happening to people of color. That's the conversation. But if the facilitator is an expert in that, they're not going to be a facilitator. They're going to be a participant.
Right.
So
right.
That's my worry. Mr. Meadows.
Yeah.
I guess I'm not quite clear on, I don't have a problem with a facilitator. I don't have a problem with a retreat. I would like our goal of the retreat to be explained at the beginning so that we can gather our own thoughts as to how we think we need to either correct things or propose changes to the way that things happen in the city of East Lansing. But I'm not clear from this little conversation as to what we're really getting at. If it is, we did not have our strategic priorities retreat this year. We were prohibited, or, you know, the COVID interrupted that. That is, although staff generally facilitates that, that does set out the goals of the city council going forward for the next 2 years with achievable guides to get to the goals being successfully completed. And if that's what we're talking about, then I think the first part of this should be to set those goals. The second part, when you talk about equity and inclusion, I think that's a bigger issue for us. So I don't know which one should come first, actually, but I think that we need to make significant changes in the way the city operates to put people worries at rest about systemic racism that has occurred here and everywhere over a period of time. That is the topic of the nation today, and we need to get involved in that and bring it to East Lansing. So I would prefer to see us do equity inclusion first and then move on to the other goals that we might have for the city going forward.
That's what I was saying, but I was just talking about the facilitator would not be an equity person, but either way, Mr. Lahanas.
So Mayor, so part of what where I thought this came from and the sort of synthesis of this is that all the council members on this very important topic have lots of good ideas, but we're not synthesizing the ideas. People are coming up with thoughts individually about what we can do to make the community more equitable, fair for people of color. So what can we do to bring us all together, meaning council? I'm going to be there to assist and listen, and hear from all of council members, and then try to get a working list that people organize to say, now this is what your consensus is that you guys think should be our priorities. Perhaps these priorities would all be put into the strategic priorities because they'll obviously raise to that level. But these are going to be specific about diversity, equity, and inclusion is what I was understanding that you guys want to talk about with this retreat. So it's kind of like everyone has good ideas. How do we get that into a process where we can get consensus around it and get that articulated? Does that kind of summarize it?
Yes, Councilmember Gregg.
So I had one comment and then one concern that I just wanted to raise. So I think my comment is yes, absolutely. I think that was my fundamental kind of motivation for proposing this, is that we all need to talk to each other. We've sat through a lot of meetings where a lot of people have told us that we have a problem, but we as a body have not had a chance to just discuss how we feel about it. I mean, obviously how we feel about it. We know how we feel about it. We feel like we need to work on it. And I don't think that this is what you were trying to say, George, but I wanted to just clarify. I have a concern about the idea of all of us as a body just expressing ideas that we think would be good. Because I think too often in this type of situation, you have a body that is made up of primarily middle-class white people. And then we kind of imagine what we think would make equity better and implement those suggestions. I think we really need to actively engage the community that we are trying to improve things for. So in this case, that would be the Black and brown members of our community, and kind of ask them what would be better as opposed to what we think would be better. I think we need to get that information from outside. So that's kind of where having the agencies that are already working on this work come and inform them about what they're doing, as opposed to us trying to invent something from scratch. I think proposing our ideas, absolutely, but we can't do it within the vacuum of this group. We have to be informed from outside as well.
Councilmember Stevens?
So, Councilmember Gregg, I think those are really good points. So would you be open to, or are you suggesting that we bring in outside groups that are involved in this work directly, and, you know, have a maybe more of a roundtable discussion at this event with those?
At least partially. I think the idea of having a two-part ongoing discussion, I think Ruth's point that we need to clarify amongst ourselves what our goals are, just in terms of what we want to see. And then, but I think, when we have established those goals, finding people that are already working on that and working on ways to partner with them is going to be a very important step of that. So I think, the scope of what we're talking about is huge. And so I think the point that this is going to be an ongoing thing is absolutely crucial to the conversation. We're not going to solve things in 2 half-day meetings, we're going to.
So could I make something out perhaps as a suggestion? Yeah, so perhaps, I talked to the mayor about perhaps a field trip to the Jim Crow Museum for council, myself, and people in the senior leadership. But perhaps it's a time of education first, where we hear from implicit bias training, attend something that's really educational like the Jim Crow Museum. We get to sort of get our mindset, well situated on the important topic, and then have some sort of a listening opportunity where we hear from groups and individuals and residents about ideas, and then get to solutions, perhaps. So perhaps it's expanding the topic for us, hearing from people, then facilitate discussion on possible solutions, because then we're not just jumping right to solutions, which is a great idea, because I don't think I have all the solutions in my head about what we should do. Does that sound like maybe a...
Yeah.
Education first sounds great.
Right, but I think that we can maybe just today, I'll propose a goal, and it's not to allay the fears or make people less afraid of being harmed by police if they're people of color. It's to actually make it make people of color safe in East Lansing. I mean, the more I read about this and the more I think about this, I think the police force works really well for me. I can call the police, they come here, they do what I want, no problem. If I get pulled over, they give me a ticket, no problem. It does not work well for people of color. And I don't think East Lansing is any different than any place else. I used to think that they were, but now I don't. I think that that's just what we have. We have implicit bias because of all the years of slavery and Jim Crow and just basic racism. So I think that could be that really, I guess it's a narrow goal, but it's broadly stated. I want people of color to be safe from the police in East Lansing. I mean, that's what all these protests are about.
Yeah.
They talk about, and you can say equity and inclusion and implicit bias and all those things, but that's not going to do it. You can't change implicit bias. That's why it's implicit. So you have to do other things like change what you arrest people for, change, whether or not you put your hands on people. Maybe you get rid of the police force completely and start over with some peace officers and some social workers. I mean, these are the kinds these are the things that you're right, Ms. Councilmember Gregg. I don't know if these are the answers, but some people do have really good ideas on this. And I like Mr. Lahanas's idea. Get in the mindset, get some training of our own, then have people come in and inform us. If that's your goal, if we can decide on that today, then these things have worked. And then go ahead and have another retreat where we actually come up with ideas. I like that.
So another thought, Mayor, is just, it's also good to think about what the rest of the government can do to promote equity in the community, because I know police is a critical issue because it involves people's safety and their perception of safety and how they feel, and it's very important. But what else can we do to raise equity in the whole community? And maybe it's through CDBG programming, maybe it's through tutoring, mentoring, so maybe there are other things as well that can help the whole community very broadly, people to be more, equitable in how resources are delivered to our residents.
Yes, I like that too. Councilmember Gregg.
I think just within the context of the discussion that we had tonight, going through our disorderly conduct code, we talked we're going through a list literally of punishments, right? Or of offenses that have a punishment. I think talking about prevention, talking about programs that are going to lessen the need for those types of codes is a huge part of this. So absolutely. I think Babcock had a comment.
Councilmember Babcock. Thank you, Councilmember Gregg. Councilmember Babcock.
Thank you. I think both are great ideas. I think we're talking about two slightly different things and how we order them. And I fully support both. As you know, I've drafted some resolutions that I think would deal with some of these issues. And I want to bring them to the agenda. So you had mentioned that perhaps waiting until after the retreat, which I think is valuable, but I also don't want to put them off indefinitely. So of course, I mean, and we're not going to meet for a few weeks now anyway. We will meet Tuesday, the 23rd, and then we have a few weeks off. So at some point in this conversation, I'd like to poll my fellow it's getting late. Poll my fellow council members to see what you think would be best as far as whether we move forward with what I've proposed in the usual timeline, week for review, then wait a few weeks, it comes up, or putting that off until, after the retreat. Thank you.
You can go ahead and do that right now. Why don't we do that? So has everybody had a chance to review Councilmember Babcock's or read Councilmember Babcock's?
At least they're out there. So
that's what I meant. Councilmember Stevens.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. So I did see the email earlier today. I just want to note that, those aren't things that are out there in the public yet. It was an email that was sent today to council. I just, I'm happy to support putting something on an agenda in the future to discuss those. I always worry about, discussing things that public members might not have seen yet. So
I meant, did everybody see that Councilmember Babcock?
I saw
has-
the email. I have not read I've read a
Councilmember
couple, but
Councilmember Babcock.
Actually, I have sent them to some people based on where my email addresses were available. But I have sent some out to members of the public, and I mentioned on my Facebook page. I mean, I have been trying to engage folks, and by all means, I'm happy to send out drafts. And again, I know that the usual proceeding is something goes up on the agenda, then there's a sort of a cooling off period, and then it comes up again a few weeks later. So, but I do want to clarify that I've made some effort to reach out to people and also encourage them to share with folks who would be interested. And if anyone's watching and you want to see them, email me at the City Council email address. It helps me organize things. Thank you.
Mr. Meadows, just 1 second. So Councilmember Babcock, so this is like the perfect example of a great idea that you want to do for the right reasons. But as Councilmember Gregg said, is there some benefit to waiting till we hear from affected populations before we make the brilliant changes? I know we're all brilliant, and I'm putting myself out there too, because I've done the same thing. I've had this, we need this resolution, but really, we're not sure what we need. We just have the same goal, which is to stop anybody from ever being hurt again because of their color. But the specific things we're going to do that, I really do think it would pay to have a lot of discussion and then come up with particular things rather than have everybody bring their resolutions over the next few months. Councilmember Meadows and then Councilmember Babcock.
I was only going to say that I agree with you that, I think there is a time frame for us to concentrate on these resolutions. I did read them. And I think that, they are well thought out. I think however, that what we need to do is we need to hear from the public. We need to go through this process that we're about to develop and then have those then published to the public along with other things that we may come up with and get a public reaction to it at maybe a special meeting where we do just concentrate on the types of things that we're going to do to address this problem in the city.
No, I think Mr. Lahanna, sorry, I'll get to you in a second. I think Mr. Lahanna's we're forming a strategy. So it would be some kind of training for all of us.
Yep.
Then bringing the affected public in and other public experts in to tell us what works if we really have this goal, and then us all getting together and working on specific things. So I think that's where we're going.
Correct.
Mr. Stevens, and
I
then,
can
go ahead.
I can lay out some sort of a schedule and put this all together for council as a draft and think that through and then get it to council just for feedback. And it sounds like we're going to take a number of months to do this, obviously. This is not going to be a quick process, but maybe we do 1 4-hour retreat or 1 retreat per month and chip away at this for the next 4 months or so, right? And
I
just
think
keep
so.
progress on it. Okay. I can
and we
propose
need
a schedule, but I'm listening more.
And we need to. One of my fears is that I really do think this is a turning point, but one of my fears is that after the presidential election, this will all fade away, and I don't want it to. I want East Lansing at least to change. Councilmember Stevens and Councilmember Babcock.
yeah, I concur with kind of everything everybody's saying. I request if Councilmember Babcock's okay, that just because we've been talking about resolutions that aren't out there in the public, if you're okay with it, and I'm looking towards George, can we have these like maybe even posted online on this online agenda that they were discussed? I don't know what the legality of that is because they weren't actually items that we put on there.
I think because of the special way we have to post things, I think an item has to be proper. But Mr. Yaden maybe could answer that question for us if we could go back and post it. Mr. Yaden, at this point, because it was discussed, or they're not deliberating on it, I guess. They're just posting it for information, right?
Yeah, the council's free to have anything they want posted. I mean, You know, it's
Okay.
not going to be
Let's
in
take it
part of the
tomorrow.
minutes or anything. I doubt that they were discussed as the resolution, but they can, council's free to have anything they want.
Yeah, and
Wouldn't they qualify as a communication to council? I mean, they've been transmitted to all 5 of us, and it's a communication to council, even if it comes from a council member.
Yep. However you get it up there, Mr. Hines, just attribute it to Councilmember Babcock as items to under consideration. Councilmember Babcock,
Got it.
did you have more, Lisa?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple things, you know, some of this is what I've seen as a public defender, what I've seen in the courts that wouldn't necessarily occur to people who aren't daily in the courts. One of the things that I proposed was a temporary process to review police misconduct claims, temporary only to exist until a process is created by the citizens. But I think perhaps most important for our purposes is that one of them would require that instead of a complaint sitting on the shift commander's desk, it would be forwarded to city council members. And that I really think is especially urgent because
I'll tell you what,
we were burned. We were
I'll tell you-
burned and we
you
need
pick
to know
the
what's
one-
going on.
So why don't we do this? I'll be your second council person for whichever ones you think are urgent and go ahead and put them on the 23rd agenda. How's that?
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right, let's go to 4.5, discussion of the police body cam vest option for securing in place. So this came up.
Okay, so this is, okay, sorry. This is do you want me to start, Mayor?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah, so this is an important item because this sort of gets to the issue of before that people have lots of good ideas, but this is one that I think everyone wants to look at directly because this is an issue of we have these body cams that are deployed with all of our officers. We invest a lot of money in it, but then they go and fall off. And this is a pretty pervasive problem where they're falling off. So council asked to look at a solution where they're not falling off. The Chief Gonzalez has talked to me in the past about a solution for this, but it's a solution that has additional equipment, this external vest carrier. And before we went out and purchased 50 of them, I wanted council to get a chance to look at it, hear the pros and cons, ask your questions, and then decide if you want to go ahead and buy them, and we can sort of make that happen. So is Chief Gonzalez on to show the pictures and show the images of what these look like and then describe the device?
Yes, he's right here.
I'm here. Good evening.
Right.
So I'll start with just the low-hanging fruit. Right now, we're currently using the magnet system that comes with the Axon camera system. We all know that falls off very easily. What I've got here is a second option made by Axon. And if you look, it's got a back plate to it. Kind of hold it up so it's not right over my shirt. It's got a back plate to it. And then a top plate that slides into 2 grooves that will pinch the shirt in between that. Cheap option. We've got a couple of these in service right now, and I don't know that they're actually going to achieve the goal that we aim to have here of not having the cameras fall off an officer's shirt. What we found so far is that the material is thin enough from the shirts that this slides around, and we haven't had an altercation with any of the individuals wearing these, but we expect that likely the wings that attach to the shirt here will probably pop off, and we're going to be right back at square one where we are now. So the option that we did come up with, and it does have some pros and cons with it, are to use an outer carrier vest. This vest here is something that we issue to our plainclothes officers so that they have something that they can put their ballistic vest in and throw on quickly if there's an emergency. But the problem with this vest is that it obviously has a militaristic look to it. So that is one of the cons. There are schools of thoughts on both sides of the issue on it, whether it's too military looking, whether it's can be dulled down a little bit to make it look like a more uniform shirt. And we can share a picture of that here in just a second. I just want to show you the attaching mechanism to how this works. If you take a look at this, mechanism, this is another attachment point for the Axon camera. And when you close it, it physically locks in place. So the back side of this is not going to come open, and it is not going to pop off the vest. I'll show you how it will attach to the vest. Unfortunately, this mechanism only attaches to what's called a molly point, which it's hard to see on the camera here, but if you look, there's little loops sewn into the vest that this then can slide through pretty easily. Attach on, and the camera is in place. It's not coming off. I'll turn it to the side here and see if you can see it. That camera is locked in place. It's not going to come off short of the molly nylon attachment point ripping off of the vest itself. So if we could share a couple pictures here. I think Miss Gordon has some pictures to share. So this first one, the Guardian, that is the current version of what I just showed you. And if you take a look at it, it is designed to look a little bit more like a uniform shirt. It's got the pockets up top, and then the molly attachment points are located right below the pocket. Underneath that button placket there is where the zipper is located. So it's an easy on, easy off system for the officers to wear. And if we scroll down to the next version, it's a little more militaristic looking. That is very similar to what I just showed you on my vest here. And it still has the molly attachment points, but it looks a lot less like a uniform shirt. That looks like a ballistic vest. And then if you scroll down one more, we had our resident model his vest. This is Captain Connolly. And it kind of gives you an idea of what the vest will look like when placed over a uniform shirt. It's very similar in color. The uniform color that we use is called LAPD blue. It's kind of in between a traditional navy blue and black. The vests come in black, and so it's not too, it doesn't contrast too much with the actual uniform shirt. Some of the other pros on wearing a vest like this. One, we talked about securing the body camera. It will not pop off in an altercation, or it cannot get brushed off. We talked before how even sometimes just putting a seatbelt on and off over the vest or over the camera attachment can pop those magnets off. But it also allows for the officers to have more equal weight distribution from their duty belt. Their duty belt carries everything from a handgun, radio, handcuffs, pepper spray, their taser, flashlight. There's a lot of equipment that sits on that duty belt, and then over time, ultimately causes injury or fatigue to an officer's lower back specifically. We have a lot of officers that have 20 years on or so that they all complain of some lower back fatigue or soreness. A vest like this allows that weight to be distributed. You can see, just for demonstration purposes, we put some pouches on the vest to show you what that would look like. If we went with an option like this, we would certainly want to do some research to designate what gets put on the vest, what doesn't get put on the vest, and then how it's worn properly. Because as you can imagine, I think people's imagination can run wild with a system like this.
Chief, could you let us know, would the body armor plates be put into this vest, so this vest would function as your body armor and the carrier for the camera?
Correct. So what you're looking at with the picture of the captain there, he does not have his normal vest on underneath his uniform shirt, which is how we wear the vest currently. It's called a concealable vest. Of course, you can still see it through the shirt. see the outline of it, but you don't see it over the shirt. It is very slim. The carrier that it sits in is very slimline so that a shirt can be placed on over it. This vest that you're looking at here has the same body armor, the same ballistic vest that we issue to our officers that they wear underneath their shirt, just inside this carrier. So what you're looking at is a carrier with the ballistic, the Kevlar panels inside it. So we wouldn't have to repurchase or purchase new ballistic vests. We just take the panels and put them in that carrier as opposed to the current carriers that we're using. The last pro with this would be it does have an easy on, easy off type system. So, you know, if an officer comes into the station and they're going to be in the station for a few hours doing paperwork, it's the middle of the summer, it allows them to take that vest off and cool down a little bit. That is much more difficult to do with the concealable system that we're currently using. So, you know, what are the drawbacks to this? I already talked to kind of that military look. You know, it can appear as more of a military type outfit. It is not as professional looking, in my opinion, as a uniform shirt is with the vest on underneath. Of course, it has a cost that comes with it. Depending on the version that we purchase, we're looking at approximately $200 per vest carrier. The cost could go up a little bit because we obviously want to have a mechanism to place the officer's name and a badge on the vest so that it's readily available, just like our uniform shirts are now. So there will be a little bit of added cost to the vest cost if purchased. And then the last drawback is more cosmetic than anything, but as you can imagine, if we're wearing a vest like this on a daily basis, it is the one piece of equipment that the officers put on every single day, where with their uniform, they're changing uniform shirts out back and forth. We issue 3 uniform shirts, 3 long and 3 short sleeve shirts for the officers. So there could be some wear and tear on these that, you know, over time will cause, you know, certainly replacement for the vests to make sure that they're in good working condition and look professional. So with that, I'll take any questions that you may have, specifically if you want to see the locking mechanism again. I know it's kind of hard to really demonstrate it here on Zoom, but I can hold that up again too.
Mayor Pro Tem Stevens.
Thanks, and thank you for that presentation, Steve. So I have 2 questions. One, stability of the camera. So I'm assuming that there are several nylon hoops, so that way the camera would stay at a front-facing angle the entire time.
Yes. So there's these hoops are loops are about an inch wide here, and if I turn it sideways, you can see I only attached it at one point. For operational purposes, we would definitely want to attach it to that second loop down below, so the camera is not going to do this. It's gonna,
yeah. Would you mind doing me the biggest favor in the world and just doing that super quick, just so I can see it?
The other thing too to keep in mind is that when we attach them on these loops, the camera is held just a little bit lower than what most of the officers are using. An attachment point up in the chest or breastbone area. This camera obviously is a little bit lower, but if you see now with it attached to that second loop, it's not gonna get moved around too much more or any more than it would be on a shirt.
Awesome. And then kind of a second question is, you described kind of an easy off vest, and I was just wondering, like during a struggle, I mean, it might not come off the vest, but is there any concern that the vest comes off?
No, I wouldn't be concerned of one of these vests coming off or being pulled off an officer. The way they are fitted, a lot of the vests have almost what's called a cummerbund attachment system, where there's a piece of Velcro underneath the vest that comes across the officer's torso, which holds it on there. These vests, the one I was showing you, and then the one in the demonstration with the pockets, they have a zip up front. So
okay, good.
Easy to take on and off. The other option, the officer pulls down over their head.
Yeah. All right. Makes sense. Mayor, you're muted.
I pressed the unmute. To make it look a little bit less militaristic, the pocket one, rather than say police, does that one have words on the front?
We can. It's got Velcro attachment points.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah,
instead of putting police across it, we would want to put the officer's name. So
okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah, that was my suggestion. Okay, Councilmember Gregg.
So sewing lady question, first of all, if the problem is just having some nylon loops attached to a shirt, can't we just sew nylon loops on their existing shirts?
We could do that, but I would be worried that
I know a lady, Steve. I know a lady with a sewing machine.
Okay, so that's a no, I take it, because the material is just not strong enough, the shirt material?
Well, I'm not a sewer, so I don't know if we attach the Cordura, the nylon Cordura loop to a fabric cotton shirt,
right?
How much that's going to hold up.
You'd have to attach it directly to the officer.
Yeah, and then I mean, I know like my comments from last week's council meeting have been very widely shared, and I'm sure that you heard my general inclination to shrink the size of our police department. One of the things that we hang a lot of credibility on is having cameras on our police officers. But if you look at like national studies, it has not been proven to change police behavior. And so I think just finding a more secure way to hold our cameras to their uniforms is not really, I do understand, and I understand the frustration of watching video where cameras are falling off, and we feel like maybe if we had the whole story, maybe if we had information, what if the cameras didn't fall off? But I feel like that's like, I'm just kind of not inclined to invest a lot in that solution right now, because I feel like the solution is actually to kind of dial back some of those things that we say are helping, or we tell ourselves the story that they're helping, but that in fundamental fact are not really making a big difference in these interactions. So I will help you prototype some Cordura loops for your existing shirts. But in terms of just like finding a more secure way to keep our cameras attached, I'm kind of not inclined to invest a lot in that solution.
Councilmember Meadows.
Yeah, I'm in favor of us going in this direction, but I just want to note, that I represented police officers when we first got dash cams and when we got body cameras, and I would dispute entirely that didn't make a change in the way police behave. They, when you're on camera, you're acting different. You are, I am, everybody is. And police officers are no different. They know that they can be tracked. I think the problem is that we distrust the idea that a body cam falls off accidentally, that in search situations that the camera itself is knocked off, so there won't be a record of it. So I think this handles the issue that I think concerns most people with regard to body cameras.
Councilmember Gregg, I would challenge you to read that study very carefully, because I read it and I thought that the assumptions were terrible, because they only used cameras that did stay on, and the big statement was, we still have as much racism in the police force and abuse by the police than we've ever had, which may well be, but there's no way to show how much it was reduced because of cameras. And in our own experience, when we say we have body cameras, and that's one thing we've done, and they don't work, then we're not being honest, not through no fault of our own.
Yeah, I see that point, and I have not read the study. I've only heard it quoted. So that is a totally fair point, and I will go back to the research.
Thanks, Mayor Byer. So yeah, So are these the only options necessarily considered then via the fact that obviously we wanted to keep the cameras that we were using? And these are the only options available to us at this point?
For attachment points, yes. When we're looking at other camera systems, they come with different options. There are options where cameras are mounted into glasses, like clear glasses, almost
Sure.
safety glasses. I think we will find the same problem. Glasses are going to, fall off, and we're not going to capture what we want to capture. There are other options when it comes to camera systems, but I have to be honest with you, the Axon system, when it comes to clarity, is the best.
Yeah, I meant as a function of attaching the Axon system, that these were the only options for that.
At this point, yes.
Okay. So I want to speak to a little bit of Councilmember Gregg's point and Mayor Byers. So I think that if we're going to start to have these discussions about priorities of the community and different things, I think that the conversation is around defunding the police. And, I think that this is a priority. I think that making sure that body cameras don't fall off is a ridiculously important thing, just for the pure fact that we want to see what happened. In certain cases, you can't. Sure, there's, dark situations where there's like no light in the area, but I don't ever want to have a situation in which a body camera falls off, and that's the reason why we can't assess what happened. So, but understanding that, the priority being right now on the calls from the community is to defund the police, and so spending $200 a vest on this might not be something that the community wants to see. So, I'm going back and forth on it, but if we are going to engage those communities in the future, to talk to key stakeholders before we actually do a retreat, if we were to be able to get feedback from those folks and seeing whether that was a priority or not, I might say that that's a good thing. But I think that holding off for a little bit might be pertinent. But
Councilmember Babcock.
Thank you. I think more cameras are more accountability, and it's not the answer. It's not necessarily the long-term answer, but it's something that's worth doing in this. It's something worth doing now. It's making the most of the situation as we have it, and we continue to evolve and we continue to do things. But as an old friend used to say, sometimes you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. We keep working toward the perfect, but more cameras is more accountability, and that's good, and we need it now. Thank you.
Does anybody have a problem with the the chief's big concern and Mr. Lahanas's is that we don't want to appear more militaristic. I would actually like us not to be more militaristic, but in terms of that appearance, Councilmember Gregg.
I mean, just same thing. I feel like we're telling ourselves a story that better equipment is going to solve our problem. And I really just don't think that that is the case. But I also, that was not a casual offer, Steve. If you bring by a police shirt, I will try to help you figure out how to get some loops on it. So, I mean, I just, to me, de-equipping the police doesn't mean putting them in more visible bulletproof vests, even if the cameras don't fall off. So I just, I'm not going to be in favor of trying to equip our way out of this problem. So,
okay. So for you, would you like us to put this on the agenda for the retreats then, rather than do something today?
Well, I think, are we like voting right now if we're going to?
No.
This is just discussion? Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to get everybody's ire up. I meant we were going to give some direction to George about whether he wanted to look into this and bring it back to us to propose, or do you want to wait for the whole discussion and just have it in a retreat where we get more information from the public? Or
I can just also be the only no vote too. That's fine if you guys are not into it. But I do think that, to me, like, and I'm sorry, Steve, if this is making you feel beat up, because that's not my intention, but this idea of kind of demilitarizing the police, divesting, reinvesting, a huge amount of that budget is personnel and equipment costs. And so like, if we're, I mean, we got to start thinking about what we need and what we don't need. And I think that is a question for that retreat is, you know, what forms of the police officer's job are delegatable to other authorities, and then like, you know, if you strip away to the absolute core of what a police force is, what does that look like and what equipment do they need? So I don't know, I'm just not.
So could I just jump in there?
Yeah, Mr. Lahanas and then Mr. Meadows.
So we just want to have a situation where we have another solution available for body cameras. And then if something were to occur and these things go flopping down the street again, people are going to say, why didn't we come up with a better solution? So that's why I'm ready to go out and purchase these right now, because I think it is an important accountability thing, but we wanted to hear from council first. So I think we should, I do think on balance, when you look at the one with the buttons and the shirts, I would err on the side of getting the cameras and having them in place, because I don't want to have people say, why did the cameras fall off again? But I really don't want to, like we said, go out and invest the money if that's not what council wants to see. So I think that's the decision point here is, if we wait 4 months and cameras go flying off in the future and we say, why didn't we fix this? We're here to try to fix it.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilmember Meadows.
In the minority on this, so. that's
Okay,
fine.
Councilmember Meadows, then Councilmember Stevens and Councilmember Greg, or Councilmember Babcock, sorry.
Okay, I'll just say that no matter how we end up having this discussion, reducing the number of police officers, or what equipment should be purchased, or what the new job should be for police agencies, as opposed to some of the things that could be done by other agencies. Even though we've already reduced our police department by, I think, 19 officers from the time that I was on council the last time anyway. And I also think that we split off into PACE some of the things that police officers used to do so that we could have a reduced force and make it effective. But in any event, even if we were going to reduce the force, we want these cameras to be attached to their body and not falling off, because that's an accountability issue that undermines the public's belief that the police are acting appropriately. So I think we need to do this right now, because I think it is the right thing to do, whether we reduce the police department at some point in the future or not.
Councilmember Stevens.
Thank you, Mayor.
Gotcha,
how
Councilmember
many-
Babcock.
How many vests would we need to be purchased?
52, Councilmember Babcock.
Oh, I wasn't done. Sorry. Sorry about it. So, I mean, we're going to have the conversation about, you know, demilitarizing the police. I mean, I'm going to go back to one of my other comments. I mean, you know, it's bringing a firearm to a situation that doesn't require bringing a firearm. You know, like I think that, you know, one of the conversations around like PACE ordinance violations, and I might have misspoke and said that PACE could handle some of those situations, but I also think that, you know, when you think about demilitarizing, I think that needs to be part of the conversation too, because it's not, I mean, the shirt can have that effect, and I do understand that, but I think one of the bigger things that has the effect is that there's a firearm in the situation. So, right. I mean,
but here we're talking about if we're going to have any police with doing things with firearms, we want everybody able to see what's going on. Councilmember Babcock. Yeah, Babcock. Sorry.
I actually don't like the look of the vests, and I don't like the looks of them at all, but I do want the cameras stuck on. So I have no doubt that Chief Gonzalez did due diligence in trying to find the right one. But if we could find something that does not look that military, I would prefer it. But again, my top priority is getting that accountability. And
okay,
so you're lucky you've got Councilmember Greg, because as I famously said, I flunked the Girl Scout sewing badge, so I can't help you, Chief.
I think that you have your direction, Councilmember Lahanas. I think that, or Councilmember Lahanas, Mr. Lahanas. I think that I think that's a promotion. A majority, at least, Councilmember Meadows and myself and Councilmember Babcock, under all circumstances, want the cameras to stay on. So if we
we'll try to find the most friendly one we can find.
Maybe teal. Would teal be good? All right, anyway.
Thank you.
Yes, is that our last agenda item?
Yes.
Okay. All right, good work tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chief Gonzalez. Thank you, council members. I will see you next Tuesday.
All right, sir.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah, you will.
Bye.